What is good? I didn't have YouTube on there, so I just joined YouTube to the stream. I think it should have gone through the stream. Let me double check. But I was talking about my last live yesterday. Was not my it was not my proudest moment. Let's just say that. So whatever you do, don't go back to the live from yesterday. Don't go to middlemaga.com. Don't go to Rumble and look at the live from yesterday because it was not one of my finest moments. I will have to give YouTube credit. And this is the live, the one with MTG and Bobert. Because I did, I'm not going to do it today. Today will be only YouTube, and Rumble and everything else. But I did 30 minutes on YouTube, then I went off to Rumble, and then now you're free. It's almost like did you ever go away to college and you're like, wait a second, I can do whatever the hell I want, whenever the hell I want. So I'm going to do whatever I want. And that's kind of how it was with the Rumble stream yesterday. That was not my finest moment. Let me just tell you that. I brought up, I don't know, I forget how it came up. Oh, you know how it came up. I came up talking about the one actress that had half her face paralyzed. No diss to her. I mean, I was laughing on it, and I kind of feel bad about that in a way. But that's, YouTube has those restrictions on you. They kind of keep you in the box a little bit, at least me. That's just in my head, not everybody. Rokeda could do whatever the hell he wants on YouTube. But not my proudest moment there. I had three. Is Twitch representing today? I had three people from Twitch comment yesterday. That's the most. I never even really noticed many comments from Twitch. I haven't been back to Twitch since I set it up. And then I got three comments. One comment was somebody asking about a soccer player. I guess he got banned from Twitter or something like that. I don't follow him, so I didn't know. And then that person was like, bro, you got one viewer on Twitch. You've got one viewer. Answer my question. And it was like, what could I say? You're right. It's just me and you on Twitch, so I might as well answer your question. Then I had my first ever op. So there was a guy that followed me, and it was the first time ever that I was like, is this the Fed agent assigned to me? Is this I wouldn't say CIA, but you look at the Twitter files, they were taking down they were making requests for some small accounts. My theory was that they're small accounts that they might have thought were linked to something else because it wouldn't make any sense. You're going for the big boys, or you go for the big boys, maybe like James Wood or RSBN Network, and then you throw in some small ones to make it look like you're not just going after them. But I don't want to make it sound like I'm important enough for a Fed to be watching. But it was a person in the chat. I'll probably upload some clips to YouTube. That the way that he was interacting, it felt like he was like Ray Epps. Like I wanted to say Fed, 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 Fed. Speaking of the Feds, what's up? What's up? The Rock in the house. Rock Prep. Haven't chatted in a minute. Good to see you. Thank you. Howdy. Good morning. Man, speaking of the Feds, conversation on Twitter got a little spicy. Not just a little bit spicy this morning. Jesse Kelly, of course, can bring the spice. And I want to take it to the omnibus bill. Jesse Kelly was basically saying every three-letter agency needs to be disbanded, needs to be eliminated. And then I said, if every three-letter agency, ATF, DHS, FBI, CIA, DOE, name them all, DOT, if they all need to be disbanded, then my question for you, Jesse Kelly, is why do we need the federal government? Shouldn't we be sending them all pink slips and say bye-bye? And it all comes back down to the money. Representative, I believe it was Dan Bishop. Man, what a good thread that he was doing with his team. Yes, it is Dan Bishop. Let's take a look at that right now. I will jump over potentially to the Kerry Lake trial, but this is actually more important, believe it or not. Not much more important than the Kerry Lake trial to me right now, but this spending, this government overreach this is the problem. And it's being highlighted better than ever. Representative Dan Bishop is highlighting it. He said, my team and I are reading through the omnibus bill today, and 1.7 trillion and 4,155 pages of it. Listen to that one more time. They're releasing a bill, a piece of legislation. It's no different than any other bill. There's nothing special about this bill. It's just a bill. This bill totals $1.7 trillion. $1.7 trillion and over 4,100 pages. This is not like reading Animal Farm. This is legalese, dollar signs, and it's unbelievable what happened and what's been happening. This is nothing new. We're just now more exposed to it. Look at the first thing that he noted from this bill. They found out that this bill expressly prohibits the Customs and Border Protection here. So he has the receipts from it. I have not verified this independently, but he's obviously a very trustworthy person to get this from. So he's doing all the work, and he highlighted it here in the bill. None of the funds provided in this subsection shall be used, 1, to hire permanent federal employees. On the face value, I have no problem with that. 2, for any flight hours other than those flown by U.S. Customs and Border Protection, air and marine operations. I think that sounds fine too. Number 3, to acquire, maintain, or extend border security technology and capabilities, except for technology and capabilities to improve Border Patrol processing. So what he's saying is they expressly prohibited funding to improve border security. It only could go to processing after they've already crossed the border, basically. Now that could go processing to send them back, but that is an interesting topic. Oh, this was not here before. Community notes. Let's see. Good. We got some context. The highlighted text is from Operations and Support. I have not seen this yet. Funding for improving border security is allocated under the separate section Procurement, Construction, and Improvements, which includes $230 million for acquisition and deployment of border security technologies. Okay, so that's good. So they said that there is money. So I stand corrected here. Page 696 of the bill says that they're saying that it is $230 million elsewhere for it. So good. I want to see more community notes on this. So it's not like the bill doesn't have anything for the border. They just didn't want to put it there. Let's see if we have any more. I do find that helpful. Well, let's see. That was excellent. Easy to understand. Does the source. If you don't know, this is a good exercise to go through. This is the community notes section of Twitter, where you can provide, it's not a fact check, it's content. Like, they didn't fact check him. They just said, hey, it's important to note nothing he said was a lie, but it's important to note that here it's in another part of the bill. Directly provides important context, neutral, unbiased. Excellent. The problem I have with the community notes is it's really selective. Like I said, they didn't do it on Yay, and that should have been done, whether you get rid of them or not. But at the same time, allocates $410 million towards border security for Jordan, Lebanon, Egypt, Tanzania, and Oman. I'm not what is Oman? I don't even know what Oman is. Oman country? Why do I not know Oman? Oman is a country. Officially, the Sultanate of Oman is an Arab country located in Southwest Asia. I have never heard of that in my life. Gulf of Oman, I think I might have heard of that. Wow. I feel really stupid right now. I have never heard of the country of Oman in my life. America last in action. So here it is. The 410 million toward border security for these other countries. And in the community notes, it said 230 million for U.S. border technologies, control technology, security technologies. Wow. So we've got 1.4 billion here for, of course, global multilateral organizations, including the UN. 1.4 billion. Let's take a look at it. I saw this. The word salmon appears 48 times. I guess he says, seems fishy. 65 million for salmon. He did some more puns here to keep it lighthearted. 3 million for bee-friendly highways and another 5 million for the salmon. Talk about a buzzkill. I did not read the salmon part. I think there's other more interesting parts as we go down here. On a more sinister note, here's at least 575 million for family planning in areas where population growth threatens biodiversity. I still don't even I'm still trying to kind of absorb what that means. This Malthusianism is a disturbing anti-human ideology that should have zero place in any federal program. It is, I mean, that to me is almost like a religious belief. I'm not an expert in it. My understanding is it's the belief that people can procreate so much that they use up all the resources. Basically, kind of like the Matrix, in the fact that the robots thought humans were spreading too much. They were going to destroy the earth and using up all the resources, so they wanted to use them efficiently. That's my understanding of it. I'd have to look it up for more detail, but there's no tangible proof of this. It's very religious innate. It's a dogma. And what he's saying is, how do you have verbiage from a dogma in the bill? You know, this is a bill that came out at 2 a.m. He tweeted about that. Came out at 2 a.m. and they were voting on it hours later. He said that you would have had to have read like something crazy, like 4 to 16 pages a minute or something like that, to have read the whole. They haven't read the bill. They're spending the money and they haven't read the damn bill. I'm going to take a break, take a look at the comments. Thanks for stopping by. I'm going to go through a lot of this thread, then jump over. Oh, yeah, let's look at this. Thank you, Berserker. Half the Republican senators are traitors against the people, thieves. Yeah, these Republicans are. It all makes sense when you look at Republicans as the same thing as Democrats, but just marketed to different people. I talked about this way back in the channel on a video called Who is the Establishment, or What is the Establishment? Basically, Democrats they represent the whole establishment. But Nancy Pelosi can't reach people in areas of Florida. She doesn't connect. They just, for whatever reason, they don't trust her. They don't look at her in a good way or whatever. So Nancy Pelosi can't reach people in Wyoming. So you put Liz Cheney in Wyoming. You put your Republican, you put Mitch McConnell in Kentucky, and he reaches certain people. The problem with Trump and MAGA is that they are branching out and exposing that uniparty. Before I jump back in the comments, let me go through here. I think I saw someone did the work of detailing there's 21 Republican senators that voted for this. Let's get the names out here before I continue reading. Yeah, let's do this here. Let's name names. No surprises to me from anybody on this list, but 21 Republicans voted to open debate on the omnibus. Dems only need 10, and these are the ones that voted for it. You have Murkowski. Let me take a look. You got Murkowski. No surprise there. Remember, they did the ranked choice voting. Why do they need to fortify this process of picking people to represent us? To make sure you've got the votes to do what you need to do. And that's why I was way out on Tim Scott for endorsing her. He's exposed himself. We know what side he lines on. Shelby's there, no surprise there. Tuberville, no surprise. I think some people thought they were surprised about Tuberville. He's corporate as they come. These are all corporate politicians. So you look at from Lisa Murkowski to Richard Shelby. You got Tuberville, Boozman. I'm not too familiar with Boozman. Tom Cotton is as corporate as they come. Our interests might overlap at certain times, but these are corporate. Marco Rubio, of course. Chuck Grassley is corporate as they come. Don't be fooled by him. Young, Moran, of course, Mitch, Susan Collins, Roy Blunt Hyde, Wicker, Portman, of course, Lindsey Graham, Thune, Cornyn, of course, Mitt, and Capito over there. I think that's Tim Pool's where he's at. He's pissed at her. She came up with the 2A stuff. She came up with the abortion stuff. Shelley Moore, I think you pronounce it Capito, right? Is it Capito? She is trash. But yeah, thank you, Berserker, for the comment. And let's go through some more comments before we read a little bit more of this bill. Kate Nicole representing says they don't want to shut down and have to work through Christmas. Of course they voted in favor. Yep. Then we have that. It's like, hey, man, we don't want to shut down and then work through Christmas. We got to get out of here. Christmas is coming. And we got the president of the sunflower country. He's going to come. He's going to probably dance on a pole for us so we can throw some dollars at him and get him some more lovely, beautiful weapons. Are you guys going to paint the weapons that were given to the sunflower country and rainbow flags? So they had to get this out the way so they could enjoy the festivities with the sunflower country president. Oh, you know about, okay, Isaac Hull, crowdsourcing the truth. Is it Oman? I am embarrassed, man. You do put yourself at risk when you go on these lives. Like, there's a country in the world I've never heard of in my life. Like, I don't know anything about this place. Isaac Hull, thanks for stopping by. I've seen you in the chat quite a bit. Appreciate you. Oman, I think it's Oman, rescinded slavery, I think, 1974. Okay, so he said here, Oman, right across the Hormuz Strait and adjacent to Iran, Omanian War during the Vietnam War and the war no one has hardly heard of. I still remember this to this day. I believe it was 9th grade. I was on a word processor. Isaac, you might remember people like me who aren't like new school. We did reports on old school typewriters at one point with whiteout, and then also on word processors. And I'm telling you, I swear to you, I'm being serious. It's one of my best work ever. I did a report on the Vietnam War, and I went to the library in Cleveland, Ohio, and I was there. I booked a room. I wasn't really political at the time, but I don't know what it was. I took this report really seriously, and I dug in deep, every paragraph, every sentence. And as soon as you say Vietnam War, I remember that. And the reason I remember that, because I was like, I don't remember anything about the Omanian War. That was back in the day. There was no internet. At least I didn't have access to the internet to Google these topics. I had encyclopedias, got all the books. I could smell the smell of the books. Man, I loved that report. I don't know why. I really got into it. So the Vietnam War is a topic that I really do like digging into, even though I haven't talked about it much on the channel. Thank you, Isaac Hull. Let's get back to the bill here. Thanks, everybody, for stopping by. Pop up live. I am going to stay on YouTube for this one. I don't think I need to drop to go to Rumble on this one. And if you're not interested in the bill, this is really interesting to me, but if you're not, I'm going to be going over to Viva. Hopefully Barnes is on there covering the Kerry Lake trial. I'm just going to go through a couple more of these. This thread could go for like hours. The bill's 4,155 pages if you're just tuning in. So we talked about salmon and all that, and then we talked about all that. So let's take a look at this. $65 million in 2 programs for Senator Leahy and a federal building named for Nancy Pelosi, Gonna Swamp. And, I'm just reporting what he's doing. I normally would want to double check all of this myself and read it. Don't have the time. So I think what I want to do is share what he found, not say anything's definitive, but just really say it's a point to ask questions. So I'm always leaving room to be wrong. I'm not really making definitive stuff here. I like to have my ducks in a row before I make definitive statements, but these are all questions that need to be asked. He talked about the Michelle Obama trail. And I don't know, 3.6 million. I don't know if I have a huge problem with this. I would have to know more. I'm very big into hiking and trails. I love the national parks. And I would just have to know who, what does the name have to do with anything? I don't care if it's called Michelle Obama National Park. She was a first lady. Don't ask Joan Rivers about that, but she was a first lady, so there's some level of respect you have to have for that. So I don't know. Tell me what you think. I like the national parks. Anybody go to national parks and collect the stamps they give? You got to give Teddy Rhodes, I believe it was Teddy Roosevelt, credit for preserving the national parks, because otherwise corporations would have just built over and destroyed all of it. I love our national parks. So I don't know if that's a national park or what, but so I'm reserving judgment on that one. And it's only 3 million, not the end of the world. But when I start seeing terms, when I start seeing religious terms in bills, you see the power of controlling the narrative. The term anti-racist is part of a dogma. It is a religion, but they don't call it a religion, so people don't treat it like a religion. If this was, the money for specific religions, people would have a problem with it. $477K for anti-racist training from the Equity Institute. That is racist. To use the term anti-racist is racist. If you want to dwell into that, they drag you into using these terms, even though I don't like them. But there's no such thing as anti-racist. How they use it here, what they're saying is it's not good enough to be equal. They're saying if you believe in equality, then you are not an anti-racist, and then you are racist. And that's in our legislation. $3 million for the Alphabet Mafia Museum in NYC. I'm not for that. I'm not for that for African American Museum or any of that. 1.2 million. You can privately fund it. That's fine. It doesn't need to come from the federal government. I don't believe in that. My money shouldn't be going here. There's no disrespect to the people who identify. That's no disrespect. I'm talking about the museum. That had nothing to do with me. My money shouldn't be going there. Period. 1.2 million in services for DACA recipients. I don't know if I'm necessarily against that. It's not a lot of money. 4.1 million in various career programs for one of the richest countries in the counties in the U.S., Fairfax. Wow. Career program. So I'll have to look at that and see what that is. Might not be the end of the world. And here we go. Dance for me. Dance for me. There's a famous video of Zelly dancing to Beyonce, all the single ladies, I believe. It's serious. I'm being serious. There's a video of that. I'll show a clip here. I'm going to turn the sound off because they copyright that one real quick. They don't pull the video down. They just say you can't use it. Even on Twitter, they copyright that one really quick. Kind of like it kind of hit a nerve, I guess. That one hit a nerve, struck a nerve. So if you haven't seen it, this is going to be, if you haven't seen it, I'm going to put it up here with no sound in a second. What is going on? Okay, so let me put it up here. So Zelly, in another life, was a little bit different. I don't want any music, just play it. I don't even know what that music is. So if you want to know, this is a meme, I'm not being serious, but if you want to know what's going on in DC right now with Zelly, he's probably just like, hey, how much you got 47 bill in there? How about a dance? Make it 100 bill. How about knee pads? Make it a trill. You know that there's some, we have people who represent us in DC who would be very excited about that opportunity. They'd be like, I got Zelly get the knee pads. We could do a 2 trilly. People, nobody's paying attention to this. Normies aren't paying attention. They would have Zelly on the House floor throwing dollars at him. If they could make sure it was private, they would probably want to get that done. Maybe that'll be the after set. That's why they were mad about Madison Cawthorn. They didn't want Madison talking about that. We've got sexual things that we like to do that we don't want you to talk about. And Zelly's good with the snow too. He can put it on his hand and get a little bit of snow. I hear the weather's getting cold, so 524 million for this religion of DEI, diversity, equity, and inclusion, which is a fancy term for equality is not enough. We need more power. Structural racism focused NIH subdivision. Wow. National Institute on Minority Health and Health Disparities for carrying out Section 301 in Title IV of the PHS Act with respect to minority health and health disparities research, $524 million. Wow. I did in my live yesterday, I talked about, I'm going to take a peek at the Kerry Lake trial. On my live yesterday, I talked about every single bill, every single dollar attached to it should be what you are hoping to accomplish with it. And that's my question there. And of course, nobody's going to ask that question. You're doing $524 million for this group. What is that supposed to accomplish so I can look at it a year from now, or the bills that happened, the omnibus bills from 3 years ago? I can go back and say, oh, you gave this same group $200 million and you said they was going to do this and it didn't do that. So now you're giving them more money. You see the big problem with these bills? They don't have to imagine you just go to the store and you have a shopping spree. You come home to your spouse and and the spouse is like, well, why did you get this? Why did you do that? And you'd be like, well, just because I wanted to. You don't even have to say why you're doing it. All you do is say, hey, this bill is great. You might have heard Mitch McConnell. If you didn't hear I hope you're sitting down. I hope you're sitting down. So you ask them in Congress, well, what's this bill for? What are you hoping to accomplish with this? And they come flat out and tell you what they feel the overarching. They don't get into details. Remember, these people on the corporate side, details are basically like poison to them. They can't get into details because that you get closer to the truth. Here's what Mitch McConnell said. If you haven't heard it, you've got to listen to this. I'm surprised he came just flat out and said it. I believe this is the right clip.
Making sure the Defense Department can deal with the major threats coming from Russia and China, providing assistance for the Ukrainians to defeat the Russians. That's the number one priority for the United States right now.
What did you say?
That's the number one priority for the United States right now, according to most Republicans. That's sort of how we see
Come again, my nickel?
That's the number one priority for the United States right now.
What is the number one priority for the United States right now?
Russia and China, providing assistance for the Ukrainians to defeat the Russians. That's the number one priority for the United States right now, according to most Republicans. That's sort of how we see the challenge.
What did you say? You said what was the number one? You've got, maybe you got laid off. Maybe you got fired because you didn't take a fascistic product from the government and big pharma. Or maybe you've got health issues. Maybe you got health bills piling up. Maybe you're concerned about the future of your retirement with your 401k. You're probably concerned about all these, even if you have a job, the security, the housing market is like on a standstill. We're looking at possibly a recession going on. You're seeing even Washington Post, big tech, laying more people off. I've listened to young Ripper 59, Eric July. He's talking about the comic book industry is not immune to this. And you've already seen some of them. One of them, I believe, I'm not familiar, but I think one of these comic book makers filed for bankruptcy, and you really, money's probably the number one thing, and job security in your future. Even if you're not retiring, the 401k is deplenishing. So that means if you look at your projection for how long you're going to have to work, if this stuff doesn't bounce back quickly, you might have to work until you're 75, 80 years old. Maybe those are the things on your mind. Mitch McConnell, how in tune are you with the common person?
Major threats coming from Russia and China.
So are you at the dinner table with your loved ones talking about in a serious capacity, looking at your bills and expenditures and child care and all the different aspects of going into the next year, your goals, your aspirations? Are you sitting down at the dinner table and saying, honey, forget about the house that we might want to buy that we can no longer afford because interest rates are higher and the dollar's devalued? No, don't worry about that. And what about paying our electricity bill, heating bill? A lot of people are using credit cards for all kinds of purchases, and that interest rate on the credit cards are going up. And are you at the dinner table and saying, honey, no, forget about all that. I care about the sunflower country.
Coming from Russia and China, providing assistance for the Ukrainians to defeat the Russians. That's the number one priority for the United States right now, according to most Republicans. That's sort of how we see the challenges confronting the country at the moment, making sure the Defense Department.
So when you look at their expressions in the background, you can see eyes. So as soon as he says that,
to defeat the Russians, that's the number one priority.
Look at his eyes. As soon as he says that's the number one priority for a Republican, look at his eyes.
For the United States right now, according to most Republicans, that's sort of.
He looks down. These are professional liars. Look at his eyes right when he says this is the number one concern for Republicans. He looks down because you can't hide what's in your brain. And your brain knows that's a lie. And you know it's embarrassing, so you look down at the floor.
According to most Republicans, that's sort of how.
You see that? That's a tell. I'm not any body language expert. Everybody has natural instincts in them.
For the United States right now, according to most Republicans, that's sort of how we see.
Right as he said it. Right as he said it.
According to most Republicans, that's sort of how we see the challenge.
She looks like a deer in the headlights. So the way to combat, these are professional liars. So the way to combat the way you're feeling, and in your head, and the cameras are on you, she's looking like she's trying to force her eyes open and try to stay alert.
According to most Republicans, that's sort of how we see.
You see that? These people are professionals. Let me get over to the Carrie Lake. Oh, I wasn't even sharing my screen. My apologies. Let me share my screen just to show you the eyes. I don't think it matters behind the eyes. I'm still not doing a good job monitoring my screen. Let me see if I can do a different thing so I can stop making an ass out of myself. When you set up a live stream, you have to have a monitor, one that shows you what everybody else sees. Okay, let me see no, that's not going to work. I'll have to figure it out. But let me show you his eyes again. Let me bring that back.
That's the number one priority. Threats coming from Russia and China, providing assistance for the Ukrainians to defeat the Russians. That's the number one priority for the United States right now.
So he's fine when he says that's the number one priority for the United States right now, because that's the U.S. government. We know that's their number one priority. Everything else is kind of funneled behind that. Their number one priority right now is, for whatever reason, giving our money, hard-earned money, to the sunflower state. It's not worrying about the fascism we saw with the Twitter files. It's not worrying about your financial interests or anything of that sort. In fact, it's the question is, how do we suck up your financial interest to give it to Ukraine? So when he says money to the sunflower country, he doesn't need to look away because he knows, okay, yeah, that's true. When you say the U.S., the number one priority for the U.S., that's the number one priority for the U.S. government. They think the government is the U.S. They don't think you are the U.S. So he's fine with that.
For the United States right now.
See? Let's bring it back again. So the United States, he's fine.
Priority for the United States right now, according to most Republicans.
So then when he says, according to most Republicans, he looks down because he knows now you're really kind of directing that towards common people, and we know that's not true.
That's the number one priority for the United States right now, according to most Republicans. That's sort of how we see the challenges confronting party for the United States right now, according to most Republicans. That's sort of how we see
That's what you call in poker a tell. So if you played poker, you see everybody get their hands and you look at them. If you play poker in person and you remember, so you look for the first time that they peek at their cards. That's why when you watch poker on TV, they wear sunglasses, because you can't, it's hard to control that natural reaction. These are professionals. They're not going to be like, you've got the bullets and, you got pocket aces and you're like, they're not that, that's how amateurs would be. And, and when I played online, I like playing online because if you got your pocket aces or whatever, you could be like, nobody could see you. So you'd be like, yeah. Or you flop that set, you'd be like, yeah, because nobody could see you. But then I'd play in person, I'd be like, ooh, this is it's more fun, but it is more difficult in a way because you can't show your emotions. So when you look at it, any poker player will tell you that this is a tell. This is a tell here.
That's the number one priority for the United States.
And look how clean Mitch McConnell can just lie. I mean, everybody can't do that. Your common person can't get up here and just lie. And I think what it is they mentally twist it into this, the number one concern for the United States. That doesn't mean you. So he doesn't consider you a part of the United States. You're just some pleb. You're just some random dude that does whatever you do for work, and you just give me your money and I'll do whatever I want to do with your money. He doesn't respect you. He would spit on you. If it didn't hurt his career and saw you on the streets, he would spit on you and step over you. So it's not even really lying to him, in my opinion. So when he says Republicans, he's not even talking about grassroots Republicans. He's definitely not talking about MAGA. He's like people like Mitt Romney and others. That is our top priority. So he can lie very easily. So when you look at Mitch, he just lies like it's nothing.
Russians, that's the number one priority for the United States right now, according to most Republicans. That's sort of how we see.
There's no tell there to me. He's just a professional liar who's been a professional liar his whole life. Some are better than others. Like Karine Jean-Pierre is a god-awful liar. And you can't be a press secretary if you're not a good liar. So she has a problem. But right here, you see a tell.
For the Ukrainians to defeat the Russians, that's the number one priority.
Even the blinking could be a tell. I know I'm spending a lot of time on this, but I find this interesting. It reminds me of poker a lot. And that's that's sometimes what I would try to do in poker, just have a straight face. It's hard. That's why a lot of people wear sunglasses. And they actually liked wearing a mask too, because it covered any mouth movements. But people look at your arms, are you fidgeting? They look at everything.
The Ukrainians to defeat the Russians, that's the number one priority.
See, his blinking increased. He's blinking more.
Assistance for the Ukrainians to defeat the Russians, that's the number one priority for the United States.
I think his blinking could be a tell, but his eyes are the big tell here.
To defeat the Russians, that's the number one priority for the United States right now, according to most Republicans.
There it is. According to most Republicans, eyes go down. So that's where he got the hand, and it's a bust. So you can look at somebody, they got dealt 7-2, which is a bad hand in no limit poker to be dealt. And you look at them when they pull their cards up, and then you look, and then maybe they look down. And you're like, okay, I saw you look down, so we're in the hand now, and I filed it away. When you looked at your cards, I saw your eyes go down, and you're trying to raise me. I'm all in. That's the advantage you would get over just a regular game theory mathematical advantage. She looks just god awful, but she did a better job of hiding it. Her eyes turned away here. So what she was able to do was delay the reaction she doesn't look natural. You see, she looks uncomfortable because she knows this whole thing is a facade, and you're in front of the camera like you're just a human being. These aren't robots. Like Fetterman is, and I'm not joking when I say Fetterman might be a great asset for them because he's just so oblivious. He doesn't have emotion. I don't mean that to be, I'm not even getting into jokes about him. I'm being serious. He doesn't know like up, down, left, or right. So you could put him in front of a platform, say, I am Groot, I love this bill, and he's not going to really give you any tells. He's a lovable, likable guy too.
The Ukrainians to defeat the Russians.
So she has many tells here, but she's doing a better job, I think. She looks like a deer in the headlight because she's fighting it. Man, that is awkward. Look at her.
Providing assistance for the Ukrainians to defeat the Russians. That's the number one priority for the United States right now, according to most Republicans. That's sort of how we.
So there she is. So she knows that's she had a problem with everything. You look at her face, her eyes are all. She had a problem with everything he said there. And then when she knew this is the one I really disagree with, and just my opinion, she froze her face to delay the reaction.
Right now.
Just like poker. Like if I'm playing poker in person, I got the pocket aces, which doesn't mean you're going to win the hand, but you've got for a fact you've got the strongest hand pre-flop. I would try to be like, you almost want to smile. You kind of fight the smile. And then maybe you rub your face and you got a little smile underneath it afterwards. You're trying to delay the reaction.
According to most Republicans,
so according to most Republicans, her face is just deer in the headlights, straight, and then here's the reaction afterwards. So he went down with his face, but here's her.
Sort of how we see.
Look at that. That's not even a natural look. She's looking off into space, and then the reaction comes later. There it is right there. I think that's the reaction to the lie. Because if you know you're doing something that's against the will of the people, you're like, you wonder, how do you sleep at night? Because it would be one thing if you said, I know the people don't want to do this, but I represent them and I think this is in our best interest. But that's not what they're saying. They're lying and saying, the people are telling me this. When's the last time Mitch McConnell had a town hall? Give me that one. Let me go over to Viva real quick, see what's going on with the trial. And I hope Barnes is there. If Barnes isn't there, then I'm going to look for another one real quick. But let's take a look here. Viva. Let's see. Is it live? Yep, they're live. So let's see. Is Barnes on there? Please be on there, Barnes. No! I think Barnes is on vacation. Oh, man, he is so good. I might look for nothing against Viva, but I'm gonna look for
County alone. Okay.
see if LawTube's in on this. But I'm gonna play this video here.
Okay,
that's correct.
And if we turn to the next page, Bates stamped 044, you'll see a second forecast model. Do you see that, sir?
Yep.
I do.
How many printers did
And
you
the
have?
projected turnout under the second forecast model was a lower number of 251,615, correct?
That's correct.
Why did you do two forecast models?
Again, because you're looking at historical elections and variances can occur. So the first forecast model looked at 2014 and 2018 my recollection, 2014 was a historically low turnout year. 2018 was one of the higher turnout years. So we expanded this model to look at more and broader number of elections to include in that forecast model. So it was the two combined, which gave us a guiding. And when I look at this, 251,615, we had 248,000
2022 primary election, correct?
in May of 2022.
And how was the turnout for the election day turnout for the primary? The turnout for the election day turnout for the primary for the 2022 primary election?
I don't remember the specific, but it was, I think, right around 106 or 108,000, which was in line with our turnout forecast for the August primary as well.
Okay.
And if we turn back to the page that's Bates stamped, the preceding page 043, and you see the first forecast model for the preceding page 043, and you see the first forecast model for the 2022 August primary election.
I can't see too good.
That's 108,080, correct?
That's correct.
And that's associated with the first forecast model, which was the higher turnout, correct?
That's correct.
So the second forecast model, which had a lower election day turnout for the primary,
They'd better come back to it.
was not the most accurate.
I think
correct?
they're laying the foundations down to say how big they knew this was going to be. And then they're going to get
It
into
was
the,
within the range of both, but yes, this first forecast model for the August primary aligned closer with the turnout for August, or the in-person turnout for the August primary.
and so now they're going to say, you knew all of this and what happened on the day of, and then they're going to get into the problems. They better.
Yeah, that's not very strong to me. I'm just jumping in, so I always leave. I'm not a lawyer or anything, but right now that's not very strong, because they're just saying, hey, were you prepared, kind of type of stuff. So because count two, I did it on a video that I just uploaded last night. They're gonna have to prove that somebody did something intentionally. So that has nothing to do. When I read the order from Kerry Lake's team, it sounded like the judge said, the only reason I didn't throw out the first count going about this ballot on demand is because you said somebody did something intentional. So if they don't get into who did what intentionally, then that's not going to go anywhere, in my opinion.
Why not?
And did
At least for that count two, because this sounds like count two. Count four is the custody. So custody has nothing to do with projection. So they look like they're doing the count two stuff now. The count four is the stuff that I really want to see. And what that is saying, that there was not a proof of chain of custody. If you don't have a proof of chain of custody and now you're under oath, I don't see how you can get away from that. Either you did or you didn't.
was the election day issues that we just discussed, and by the county's own admission, occurred at 70 vote centers.
70 votes.
Was that event factored into, or an event like it, factored into the second forecast model?
So first, let me clarify. I didn't acknowledge that there were 70 vote centers that had printer issues.
Oh,
I acknowledge that we sent out 70 technicians to 70 voting locations.
Thanks for the distinction there. Distinction without a
Higher
difference.
historical models turnout. There was no analysis to include if there was an issue on site at any voting location.
So there was no analysis in the second forecast model of 251,000 projected turnout that took into account a disruption in the election on election day, November 8th, 2022.
None of the forecast models include that type of
Oh,
analysis.
makes total sense.
Would a disruption such as what was experienced, I mean, would you agree with me that there was a disruption on November 8th, 2022 in the election?
I would say that we had some printers that were not printing some timing marks on our ballots dark enough to be read in by our tabulation equipment.
Would you call that a
Voters
disruption?
had legal and ballot options to still be able to participate within our voting locations. So agree, it would not couch it as a disruption.
Wow.
So you don't believe that what happened on November 8th was not a disruption in the election process?
Zoom in more. Add flames.
I do not couch it as that.
Wow.
Are you aware that Supervisor Gates came out on election day
Yep.
and said 20% of all vote centers were affected by these issues?
Problems with the
ballots being
tabulators.
rejected by the tabulators?
Oh, I'm aware of that.
Again, we didn't have ballots rejected by tabulators that were not being read in by tabulators.
Sorry, he
That's
actually-
not a disruption when voters still had valid options to participate.
Oh, what, to go
in
drive to
dropping in
another
those
center?
ballots in our secure door number 3,
Wow.
which is a similar process that 8 other counties use as their only option for voters to be able to return their ballots.
Yeah, Mr. Jarrett, you're not answering my question. My question isn't what other options existed for voters. My
Is that
question
a
is,
disruption?
would you agree that there was a disruption
He already answered that. Asked and
of
answered.
at least 20% of the vote centers in Maricopa that caused delays
Mm-hmm.
in the voting process?
Objection, Your Honor. The witness has already answered this question
Oh,
as to
don't-
whether he characterizes it as a disruption.
It's a different question.
I'll overrule. If you can answer
That's
it,
right.
you may, sir.
Good, good, Judge.
I'm not changing my response.
Yeah, it was not a different question.
Nothing better than not changing your response.
Do you
with
believe
true
that
facts.
did you hear of any reports of wait times to vote of over 60 minutes?
Yes, I did.
Do you call that a disruption?
What is the target wait time for in your model?
20 minutes.
Do you know?
On average, a half an hour.
Okay.
Lawyers don't ask questions they don't know the answer to, so he's playing games, I think.
Because they still have a chance to go drive to another location if that
Let's
one
turn
works.
to Bates stamped 047. It's page 17.
Would you
Oh,
call
still
wait
exhibit 2,
times
correct?
of
Yes, Your Honor.
twice your estimated wait times a disruption? Yes or no?
You see the section entitled Time Needed to Vote a Ballot, Mr. Jarrett?
Yes, I do.
And you see the second paragraph under that section where it says, on average, we estimate that it will take voters between 4.4 and 6.4 minutes to vote in the 2022 primary ballot and between 8.5 and 10.5 minutes to vote the 2022 November general election ballot.
That's to complete and fill out the ballot.
Yeah, not to wait an hour
So
and a half
is
in
it
line
your
to slip it in.
testimony then that 30 minutes is the time allotted projected for a normal election to enter into the vote center, cast your ballot and leave?
No, our average was 30 minutes in line to check in,
Why would
and
that be?
then to a few minutes to receive their ballot, upwards of 8.5 to 10.5. So in the 2020 general election, 8.5 to 10.5 minutes to complete the ballot. And then there could be some time to then wait in line at the tabulator, put in their ballot and feed it into a tabulator.
Did you ever become aware of multiple reports at various vote centers in Maricopa County where wait times exceeded 2 hours?
Oh, mamacita. I'm aware of it.
Exceeded 2 hours? No.
You were not aware of that?
What?
Our data shows that
Not your
we had
da-
some voting
not-
locations approaching 2 hours,
Oh,
not exceeding.
oh, okay. Thank you for the distinction. Without a difference again. Okay.
Even at some locations approaching 2 hours, would you consider that a disruption?
There you go. I'm not changing my
That's
answer.
why we post wait
That's
times
why-
on our website.
that's why it's not an
Highly
answer.
publicized and advertised.
Oh, so you're
In all of
publicizing the
those
problems.
locations, we had close by locations. So for example, Biltmore was approaching 2 hours in the last hour. of
Would you call
voting
that a
day.
disruption?
With 2 miles away at Faith Lutheran, there was a voting location that had a 1-minute wait time. They report those every 15 minutes, and then we can calculate the wait time based on how long it would take someone to check in at a voting location.
So if those poll workers were testifying under oath of wait times exceeding 2 hours at multiple locations,
I wanted to do a direct feed from it, but the audio, Viva has a great audio. I don't know where he got his from.
Make estimates, but unless they're actually
Wow.
see how many voters are checking in at a voting location throughout the day.
So you're basing the wait time calculation on prior elections, not on what's actually happening on scene at the day of election?
Based on how quickly a voter can check in through that process. That's correct.
So I want to go back to the earlier question about the 19-inch ballot image being placed on a 20-inch paper.
RSBN.
Did you hear of any
okay.
reports of that occurring in the 2022 general election?
I did not.
If that occurred, would that be a failure of Maricopa County's election process?
Got it.
I'm not aware of it occurring, and I'd be surprised if there was a ballot.
He's watching the RSBN feed. You could see
I
it
want
there.
to
So there we go.
go back to the earlier question about the 19-inch ballot image being placed on a 20-inch paper. Did you hear of any reports of that occurring in the 2022 general election?
I did not.
If that occurred, would that be a failure of Maricopa County's election process?
I'm not aware of it occurring, and I'd be surprised if there was a ballot on demand printer that had a 19-inch ballot on it.
Whoa.
Okay, I understand that,
That's not the question.
sir, but
And
if
the
that
reason
occurred-
why is we did not design a 2022 general election on a 19-inch ballot. That ballot does not exist. The only ballot that exists is a 20-inch ballot.
and when you say we designed,
Remember, lawyers don't ask questions they don't know the answer to. So something is up with the 19-inch thing.
who designed the ballot? Is that outsourced to another company or is that done in-house by Maricopa?
In-house by Maricopa County staff.
What department would that staff fall under? Is there a specific name for it?
Our ballot tabulation team. So reports to me.
And do you maintain records as to the ballot definition that was created for the 2022 general election?
Yes, we have records of all the ballots that were designed.
And so I'll go back to my question again.
Uh-oh.
If a 19-inch ballot image was put on a 20-inch paper in the 2022 general election, would that be a failure of your election process?
It would, if something like that happened, which I don't know how it would, yes, it would have been a mistake.
Woo.
Could that have also been a deliberate act?
Woo.
Again, you're asking me to speculate about things that I have no knowledge of occurring. So I don't know if it could have been a deliberate act or not. I don't believe that that occurred.
Getting hot under the
How
collar.
involved are you in creating the ballot definition?
So my team does, and then I overview it and I'll review examples of those. Yes.
Thank you, Mr. Jarrett. Don't have any further questions at this time.
Okay, thank you.
They've got something.
Your Honor, a quick clarifying question as to how the court would like us to proceed. We intend to call Mr. Jarrett in our case in chief tomorrow. And so if the court would like me to reserve all questions for him until.
That sounds like some procedural stuff. They brought up something that they know. You don't bring up something about who did something, if somebody did something on the wrong size ballot. I'm not an expert on this, but kind of would be sabotage is what they're alleging. You don't bring that up unless you have an example of it. Ooh, that was awkward.
Good morning, Mr. Jarrett. Thank you for being here today.
Thanks, Joe.
Just a few very quick questions. I believe you testified that your election day plan called for, or, assumed an average wait time of a half hour for each vote center. Was that what you testified?
That's correct.
Okay. Do you know what the actual average wait time was?
It was less than a few minutes on election day, on average for all of our votes.
Average for all the vote centers was less than a few minutes on election day, you just said.
That's correct.
Okay.
In our Canvas presentation, we had the exact number. I don't recall it off the top of my head right now.
Thank you, Mr. Jarrett. Are you aware that one of the political parties urged their voters to forego early voting and vote in person on election day?
What does that have to do with
I'm
anything?
aware of that.
Okay, you're aware of that today.
That's correct.
All right. Were you aware of that when you prepared your analysis for the election day plan?
No, I was not.
Okay. So I'm assuming, but you tell me, please, this urging by a political party was not factored into your election day plan. Is that correct?
That's correct.
How do you define urging from a political party? How do you define that?
Prior to
It's irrelevant.
the election management system, what does the election management system do?
So it is our tabulation system. So it's what we use to program and design all the ballots. It is also the system that, as we're running ballots through our tabulators, that it's then counting those ballots. It's also then what sends ballots to be everything that was related to the ballot creation, to tabulating the ballots, to reporting results. Everything that was related to the ballot creation, to tabulating the ballots, to reporting results is housed within our election management system.
Okay. How many elections can be housed within the EMS?
Well, multiple elections can be housed. Given the number of ballots that Maricopa County has one house on our election management system at a
Hold
time.
on, I
Okay,
gotta
so
fix
for
mine.
the 2022 general,
I'm on the wrong Wi-Fi. Give me a second. Hopefully it just bounces to the right one here in a second. 3, 2, 1.
At a time.
okay, so for the 2022 general, did you only have the 2022 general on the EMS?
That's correct. That's what my understanding is. We only had those and all the data related to those files.
What happens to the other data, the 2022 primary? What happened to it?
So we transfer those to backup archived storage devices and store those. We have one storage device of that on site within our tabulation center and then one offsite.
Okay. And Mr. Jarrett, you testified earlier that I believe you said you did not design a 19-inch ballot for the 2022 general election. Is that correct?
That's correct.
So if it was not designed for the 2022 general election, does it stand to reason that there would not have been a 19-inch ballot on the EMS?
That's correct.
Okay. And if there was no 19-inch ballot on the EMS, does that also mean that there would have been no 19-inch ballot programmed into the ballot on demand printers?
That's correct.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Jarrett.
I want to
You
go
were
back.
asked about deliberate acts with regard to the printers. Mr. Jarrett, I'm going to ask you a very direct question. Did you personally do anything to any ballot on demand printer to cause it to print too lightly to be read by an precinct-based tabulator?
No, I did not.
Did you give an order to any of your personnel to do any such thing?
I did not.
Are you aware of any order like that being given?
I'm not aware of that.
Are you aware of any of your personnel engaging in such an act?
I am not aware.
Are you aware of anybody engaging in such an act on any of our ballot on demand
Well, Kerry Lake's lawyer better have someone. They brought it up. So we'll see.
printers used in the 2022 general election?
I am not aware.
That's all I have, Your Honor. Thank you.
I got to go back to that 19-inch stuff. I'm sorry. I was confused about what they were talking about there.
System at a time.
Okay, so for the 2022 general, did you only have the 2022 general on the EMS?
That's correct. That's what my understanding is. We only had those and all the data related to those files.
What happens to the other data, the 2022 primary? What happened to it?
So we transfer those to backup archived storage devices and store those. We have one storage device of that on site within our tabulation center and then one offsite.
Okay. And Mr. Jarrett, you testified earlier that I believe you said you did not design a 19-inch ballot for the 2022 general election. Is that correct?
That's correct.
So if it was not designed for the 2022 general election, does it stand to reason that there would not have been a 19-inch ballot on the EMS?
That's correct.
Okay, and if there was no 19-inch ballot on the EMS, does that also mean that there would have been no 19-inch ballot programmed into the ballot on demand printers?
That's correct.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Jarrett.
But that doesn't prove anything, though.
With a lower forecast number.
Well, we had record turnout, near record turnout for the 2022 general election. So 64%. The only turnout in the recent several decades that exceeded that was actually 2018, which was 64 point something percent turnout as well. So our forecast model was forecasting at potentially the highest turnout percentage that voters would turn out. So that's why it captured and forecasted 251,000, which was very close to 248,000.
Actually, your forecast model, you had the other one forecast at over 290,000, correct?
That's correct.
And that model didn't take into account Republican leaders telling their Republicans to come out on election day and vote, correct?
It did not. It factored in 2020 presidential and 2016 presidential factors, which usually a presidential election is much higher. So that's why it was ranging up to 290,000.
Council asked you some questions about a 19-inch ballot image being projected onto a 20-inch paper. You recall that? And I asked you questions about that.
Yes, I recall.
This is intense.
Do you have any idea how that could occur?
I do not.
Would it require two different ballot definitions to be installed on the EMS?
Your first question asked if I have any idea how it could occur, and I said I do not.
Okay. Do you know what a site book is?
Yes, that's our check-in station.
And the site book pulls up the voter, correct?
Yes, it's connected to the recorder's voter registration system through a virtual private network, secure. So then it would, when a voter checks in, it pulls up their specific information and then would alert our ballot on demand printer which ballot style to print.
So where does the ballot definition reside then?
So it's on a laptop that's connected to our ballot on demand printers.
Thank you. I have nothing further.
May I excuse the witness?
Yes, Your Honor.
Subject to recall tomorrow on our case in chief, of course.
Very well. Thank you, Mr. Jarrett. Step down, sir. Okay. Okay. I've allocated some time to take a mid-morning break. Some of that has to do with my court reporter. So we do need to take a recess for that. Who would you be calling as your next witness?
Your Honor, matter of fact, I was just talking with counsel about asking the court for a short break. I want to reassess given the time. And so if I may.
Yes, you certainly may, because I'm going to have the mid-morning break here.
Yes.
So what I'm trying to assess, though, is whether I can shave 5 minutes off of that or not.
Your Honor, whatever you.
No, you need a full 15 minutes.
No, Your Honor.
Okay.
I agree to 10 minutes.
10 minutes. We'll be back on the record then. We'll stand at recess.
Thank you,
until
Your
then.
Honor.
So it looks like they're going to recess. Wow, that was intense. I'm going to Google this 19-inch. I've not heard this. Has anybody heard about this 19-inch discrepancy issue here with the ballots before? I've not heard that. So I'm just going to see if I can, well, I won't Google it. I'll have to go to DuckDuckGo or something. And that's the best. What search engine are people using? You cannot use Google is. Wow. I remember the first time I used Google was actually 96, 95, 96-ish. And it was an amazing search engine. It's really sad to see what it's become. Anything that's important, the results are changing quickly. Hang on, everybody. They don't need to rewrite history. They're rewriting the present as you see it. So they won't even need to rewrite history 100 years from now. It won't be there. Duck, duck, go. And it makes you wonder, when we have chips and brains, are they going to just rewrite your memories? Like, hey, I remember this time where Kerry Lake had this trial and we were trying to figure out the 19-inch ballot versus the 20. And it's almost like Men in Black. It'll be much more easy. It'll just be an upload to the Borg download to us peasants. And it'll be like, yeah, forget about that. You remember that time when we saw proof of the government illegally conspiring with a private tech company, and probably the tech company that I'm doing this platform on right now. Remember when we saw that they were doing that, literal fascism, and we found out about it, and the only people who had courage to protest it, they were incarcerated? Do you remember when that happened? Boom, flash. Your memory's gone. You know that's obviously where they would go. I mean, that's not going to happen within a generation. That's probably 3 generations from now, but that will be their new normal, in my opinion. 19-inch ballot versus 20-inch ballot, Arizona. I have no idea what that was about. I'm sure it probably came up before. Didn't look like he was ready to answer that question, though. So maybe, okay, let's see here. Maricopa's ballots. Let's see. These are just random articles while we wait to see what's happening with the feed. I'm going to pull up this article here. Right now we are in recess. I have converted over to covering the Kerry Lake trial, and as long as I can, I do have to go at some point, but I'll hang on for a while. Read the fine print. Smaller text. I don't know if this is related. I'm just doing a search. Read the fine print. Small text size on Maricopa County's massive ballots worry voter advocates. Oh, that's just a small, like what, for senior citizens or people? Voter advocates are warning it will be hard for voters to read and understand. So I don't think that's it. Let me see if 19 comes up in here. 19. This year's ballot is the longest yet. So this is the topic here. This year's ballot, this is from ArizonaVoteBeat.org. This year's ballot this is an October article. This year's ballot is the longest yet at 20 inches. In recent years, primary and general election ballots have been 18 or 19. Okay, I didn't understand that. Okay, the ballot with the most contests this year is in a Mesa precinct with 87 contests. The sheer number of contests made it difficult to fit everything on the ballot, not just in Maricopa County, but across the state. There are 10 statewide propositions, 2 of which have a mandatory 53-word paragraph explaining that the measures can't be changed if they are approved, except in certain circumstances. Shioran said she is used to seeing about 4 or 5 propositions on the ballot, but not 10. Of the 10, 8 were proposed by lawmakers, not voters. So it says that in recent years, the election ballots have been 18 or 19 inches. But this year's ballot is 20 inches. So I wonder if Kerry Lake's lawyers have to have something that proves something, or something that goes along the lines that they know somebody did something with a 19-inch versus 20-inch that caused problems. Otherwise, I don't understand the questions, but we'll see. I don't know. They could just be reaching. Who knows? But it looks like, because when I read the actual, let me bring up I don't know if this is the right document to go back to, but I did this yesterday, and we looked at the actual complaint, and it looked like the judge really in particular wanted proof of malfeasance. Let me double check it. And the reason why I bring that up is if they could say it wasn't, see, he said I wasn't aware. It could be an accident, and I don't think that would go in her favor, but it's good to expose. And let me find the link to the actual. Here is the full decision, which I think I have an eye on the RSBN feed. As soon as they come back, then I'll go back to it. So we're looking at count 2 here, I believe. So I'm on the actual order here that said that we're going to do this whole process. Count 2. And so count 2 is what they're talking about is so they're alleging malfeasance. So the court, this is the one we're talking about in court right now. The court takes Carrie Lake, I'm translating it, Carrie Lake to mean 2 things by this count. The use of these ballot-on-demand printers lacking certification was misconduct by some responsible official. So misconduct doesn't have intent, I don't think. Number two, that someone did something to the printers to cause them to misprint. That is intent. Okay, so then they said the former is not enough to state a claim. So you see what I mean? Carrie Lake has no chance on this topic here unless she can prove that someone did something. That's going to be very difficult unless she has something we don't know. And in this last paragraph, they talk about it. They said Carrie Lake is the plaintiff, so that's why I'm translating it. Carrie Lake, they're not back on RSBN yet. Carrie Lake has nonetheless also alleged intentional misconduct. So that's where I just jumped into this late. I don't know if they're alleging anything outside the 19-inch versus 20-inch ballot discussion that is sufficient to affect the outcome of the election and thus has stated an issue of fact that requires going beyond the pleadings. The court takes no position as to the evidentiary weight it will give the plaintiff's proffered experts at trial and notes that at trial it must indulge all reasonable assumptions in favor of the election. So the judge is saying, default, if you're watching this trial, default that everything was good. So you've got a heavy burden to change the mind, and obviously we haven't seen anything like that yet. We're just started. There you see the seeds being planted, but the judge said right here, basically, it's the legalese way of saying you got an uphill battle. I'm assuming everything was on the up and up, and you've got a hell of an uphill battle to prove to me that it wasn't, and not just misconduct, because that was number 1, and they said no, that's not enough. 1 is misconduct, and they said the former is not enough. So if he can say I didn't know and it was a mistake, that's not going to be enough. It looks like they're going to have to really prove it. And that's what the judge basically laid out here. We will indulge it as long as you're not too wackadoo, all reasonable, and then weighing the evidence. However, evidence is not before the court at this motion to dismiss. So then they said, we'll go forward with it. So this is, we'll see. We'll see if there's a Perry Mason moment in it. Very, very interesting stuff. Go to the comments real quick. Oh, Broken Traditions. What's good? Great coverage. I'm glad I tuned in. Appreciate you. Thanks for stopping by. And please support. If you don't know, Broken Traditions has a YouTube channel that is popping off. Great marketing, thumbnails. I've seen videos from him with like 60,000 views. What it shows me is people getting value out of a lot of the topics. He talks about a lot of topics that I wish I had time to delve into, so I'll listen to him cover those. So thank you. Sub up to Broken Traditions. I will holler at you to get you on the show after the holidays sometimes if you're still interested. I would love to have you on the show. Berserker said, we'd become literal NPCs complete with AI updates. There would be some benefits. And like Berserker, Berserker's talking about if we have the chips and brains. Imagine this. So Tim Pool was like, he basically was hinting like, I'm not getting the chip in the brain. And I'm watching Tim Pool. I'm like, you will get the chip in the brain, Tim. I know you will. You know why? Because if someone can afford to put, it'll be expensive at first, like Neuralink. You put a chip in your brain. Imagine that you're like the Net Matrix. It might not be in our lifetime. I don't know when. But imagine if you could read, I was just talking about the Vietnam War. Imagine if you could read 10 books about the Vietnam War in 10 minutes. People like Tim Pool, people like you watching this video, you're addicted to information. That's probably why you're watching the video. Whether it's right or wrong, you're like, oh, well, you didn't say that right, or you're wrong there, but you're gathering information. So basically, you have the chip in your brain. You'd be able to suck a whole encyclopedia up into your brain. You'd be able to learn how to fly a helicopter in 2 minutes, just like the Matrix. You're not going to say no to that if you can afford it. Trust me. It's easy to say that now. You will not say no. It just won't happen. You could basically, you wouldn't even be watching someone cover a trial like this. You'd wait for the trial to be over. It would be happening in like way faster than it's happening now. But you'd wait for the trial to be over. You'd watch the 2-hour proceedings, the 4-hour, 6-hour proceedings in 1 minute and suck it in your brain, and you'll have all the knowledge. So we will get those chips in our brains. Don't get it twisted. If you have a cell phone in your pocket within arm's reach right now, you will get that chip in your brain. I guarantee that to you. There'll be pros and cons that come with it. Let's see here. The last friend of show, thank you for stopping by, says there is a good Outer Limits show where people have brain implants episode. Okay, I'll check that out. It's very interesting. And it will not all be bad, like I said. I don't want to assume that. Okay, they're back. Let's check it out. Hear what they're talking about.
So we'll do that today and tomorrow. I'd like to start at 8:30 tomorrow rather than 9 o'clock if we can. Stretch a little.
What is?
I don't want to burn the midnight oil on this. I think that we need to have focus and attention and be clear-minded. But I think starting at 8:30, coming back early from lunch, that I'm not taxing anybody's mental capacity with that. Do you agree, plaintiffs?
Yes, Your Honor.
Defendants? Ms. Khanna?
County agrees, Your Honor.
So that's what we'll do. All right. Are you prepared for your next witness?
Yes, Your Honor. We call Clay Parikh.
Very well.
Sounds like the judge and them, they want to get home for the holidays or get this wrapped up. They don't want any delays or funny games.
Do we have this thing?
Why is
Yes.
Sir, if you could make your way around to the witness stand and have a seat. As soon as your witness is situated, you may begin. Are you doing the questioning, Mr. Olson?
Yes, Your Honor. Good morning, Mr. Parikh. Could you please state your full name for the record?
My name is Clay Uday Parikh.
And where do you currently work?
I work at Northrop Grumman, a defense contractor.
And what do you do with Northrop Grumman?
I'm an information security officer. I basically spend my week auditing classified systems, making sure the systems are functioning properly, looking for insider threat and those such actions.
Do you have any experience with electronic voting systems?
Yes, sir, I do. I have 9 years of experience in 3 voting labs. It's actually 2 physical sites because Wiley transferred to NTS Laboratories, National Testing Lab, and then at Pro V&V.
Just relate to, are you familiar with what's called the EAC, the Election Assistance Commission?
Yes, sir, I am. In 2008, my very first scheme was to evaluate Wiley Laboratories procedures in which I had to evaluate the voting system guidelines.
And perform testing on electronic voting systems in order to certify them in accordance with EAC guidelines.
Yes, sir, I was.
And you did that for how long?
For 9 years.
And that was through Pro V&V, a voting system testing lab?
I was through a professional staffing company, and that's how I was.
So this is basically him trying to say this expert knows what he's talking about.
Permanent security specialist on their payroll. I was the only one.
And when you say you refer to the labs, in this case, Pro V&V, what is a voting system testing lab?
The voting system testing lab is where the a vendor submits to the EAC a test plan. It gets submitted to the EAC, it gets approved, then they go to a voting system test lab. There's a project that's done up, and they get tested. These tests can go either by the EAC for federal certification, or they can go by the Secretary of State. That depends on the state's requirements under their laws as far as their certification efforts.
Do you know what voting system testing lab certifies the electronic voting machines used in Maricopa County?
Objection, Your Honor. Relevance. I believe this line of questioning about certification is no longer on the table given the court's ruling earlier this week.
Yeah, a lot of the question for certification, I mean, qualifications purposes, so I'll give them a little bit of leeway. You can answer the question if you're able to, Mr. Preek.
Yeah.
Certification was one of the orders that was dismissed in that ruling I just showed.
Yes, it's pro V&V.
Do you have a background in cybersecurity, Mr. Parikh?
I have about 20 years of experience in cybersecurity.
Can you, just briefly go through some of your qualifications with the court in cybersecurity?
Yes, sir, I can. I have a Master of Science in Cybersecurity, which it's on a computer science track. I also have a bachelor's in computer science, a systems major. I have the Certified Information System Security Professional certification. I've had that since the beginning of 2007. That is the gold standard as far as security certifications are considered. I'm also a certified ethical hacker, and I'm also a certified hacking forensic investigator.
What is a certified hacking forensic investigator?
That means you go in, you do a forensic analysis, specifically looking for malicious malware. You do root cause analysis. You find out what the malware was, how it infected, and that. These are not your standard forensics type approaches that most law enforcement agencies would use. Their standard is a little bit slower because of the evidentiary stuff. But if you're in an incident response center, as I've helped run in the past, when you have an emergency or something happens, you have to react then. And these are the type of actions that you learn. You learn to get in, do the analysis quickly, make sure you're secure in your analysis because you have to come up with remediation efforts.
How long have you been at Northrop Grumman?
Just about 3 years.
Okay. So prior to working with Northrop Grumman, did you work in a cyber capacity for the U.S. government?
Yes, I have.
Could you describe some of your positions starting, for the past 15 years, 20 years that you've been involved in and what you did, just briefly?
I've worked in anywhere from mid-sized companies that dealt with cybersecurity information assurance to as large as some of the larger ones. I've worked for Lockheed Martin, which is a good tenure of my time, Leidos Corporation, BAE Systems, and in all those capacities, I did information assurance, cybersecurity. At one stint with a smaller company, I was to perform threat for an agency within the United States Army.
Did you ever work with the Marshall Space Flight Center?
Yes, I was. I was the IT security manager for the enterprise operations.
And just briefly, what does the IT security manager do?
I'm in charge of making sure the vulnerability scans were done, that all the security configurations, that all the governance and compliance that NASA developed for their security postures and daily operations and continuity of operations were followed.
Did you ever work for the Army Corps of Engineers?
Yes, sir. I was the deputy cyber manager for their enterprise operation, which includes 52 major sites throughout the world.
And in that capacity, what were your job responsibilities?
I was the deputy cyber manager, and because of my certifications and qualifications, I helped the security operations center manager handle his task and monitoring, and I also helped the security incident response manager in her functions because they're the ones that react to when the Army Corps is attacked, and they're attacked a lot.
Do you possess a security clearance, Mr. Parikh?
Yes, sir, I do. I'm currently a top secret cleared, but I've held SCI levels before.
Did you ever work with the Army Threat Systems Management Office?
Yes, sir. That's where I played threat, ITAC systems, and whether it was an information system, a medical system, or a weapon system.
Do you have any other certifications besides CISSP or?
So this is obviously just trying to still make sure he's an expert, because in that judgment, you could tell the judge was like, I'm not going to assume your experts are really experts, basically, is my interpretation. So he's like, you better make sure he's an expert. So he's spending a lot of time saying that you might question what he's saying, but you're not going to do it because he's not credible.
To refine and affect the quality output and service that you provide.
Are you familiar with the phrase root cause analysis?
I am very familiar with the root cause analysis.
Could you please just briefly explain what root cause analysis refers to?
In simple terms, it's basically troubleshoot, but you have to find what caused the initial issue to happen. Sometimes this can be very complicated. Sometimes it can be fairly easy, but you have to have an intense understanding of the overall process involved in any organization. And this root cause analysis could be done from what's called a governance perspective, where you look at documentation, process, and procedures, because flaws within those can technical finding. I've done hundreds to probably thousands of root cause analysis in all different types of environments.
Could you give an example of an actual?
I've done one for the Navy Marine Corps Internet, which was the world's largest WAN. They did, which has tens of thousands of workstations. There was an issue that resolved. They were having, after upgrades of the operating systems, they had technical issues, and based on those type of issues and analyzed and know what was going on, I requested that the BIOS data be provided, and that ended up the root cause, because the problem systems have that, because they did not properly manage the BIOS. That's a low-level technical one. There's been others involved where the Air Force had it, what's I would say world-facing internet site. Was on the internet, got pulled down because of vulnerability was found. And I was put in charge to do the root cause analysis to find out how the system was compromised, what happened, and suggested the mitigation efforts.
Have there ever been any criminal prosecutions that have resulted from your work?
Yes, both federally and privately from an employer.
So the federal government relied on your assessment of a situation in order to bring criminal charges against somebody?
Several times. Some of those I cannot talk about because of the nature and the classification.
Did you do an analysis of the events that took place in the election day operations in Maricopa County?
Yes, sir, I did.
And what did you do in terms of your assessment of that situation?
I do like I do with any system that's involved with electronic voting systems. I look at the state statutes and what they reported to the federal government. As in this case, Arizona follows HAVA, and that's in their laws and statutes. Then I go from that, look at the systems they use. Then I look at their procedures. I downloaded the Secretary of State's elections manual, the Maricopa elections manual. I read through testimony, declarations. I reviewed the EAC certification of the electronic voting system, the test reports from ProVNV concerning the election system. I downloaded and read the applicable Title 16 part of the Arizona statutes, which covers the election systems. Then I read a lot of testimony. I watched a lot of the video televised meetings that Maricopa conducted, and a lot of the video testimonies.
Okay. And did you interview or speak with any election day workers, like technicians who participated, retained by Maricopa to work at the various vote centers on November 8th, 2022?
Yes, sir, I did. I had spoken with after seeing the declaration and an interview conducted for the declaration, I asked to interview them and ask specific questions.
Did you perform an inspection of the ballots on behalf of plaintiff in connection with an inspection pursuant to ARS 16677?
Yes, sir, I did.
And when did that inspection take place?
That was just yesterday.
And without saying what your conclusion was from that inspection, did you reach a conclusion?
It confirmed my initial assumptions on the possible effects of what caused the technical issues. Yes, sir.
Uh-oh.
Your Honor, at this time, we'd like to offer Mr. Parikh as an expert.
Arizona doesn't do that. Basically, you can ask the questions and then it's an objection as to foundation. So.
Okay, yes, Your Honor. Mr.
Shoot.
Parikh, you examined
Not a big deal. Sounds like the lawyer's not familiar with Arizona law.
the ballots in the inspection performed at MTech yesterday, correct?
Yes, sir. I was allowed to select the sampling per the request in the court's instructions.
Can you did you have a plan going into that inspection with what ballots you wanted to select and inspect?
Yes, sir.
Could you describe that plan?
Through a FOIA request, the cast vote records were publicly available. I reviewed those, analyzed the data, and selected the roundness base so I could follow the court's directions for the petition. So I knew exactly what to request because it was time consuming and Maricopa County was gracious enough to give us that time. So I wanted to use it wisely and make my decision quickly and accurately.
Do you know how many vote centers you were able to inspect ballots from?
I was allowed to inspect from 6 vote centers.
Were you able to execute on your plan after you went into MTech to select ballots?
There were some modifications to the plans because the election day ballot data, the cast vote records, which would be referred to as a system of record because it has to be maintained in its integrity, was no longer valid due to the recounts.
When you say it was no longer valid, what do you mean?
The ballots had been retabulated for the recounts. Thus, Maricopa County was unable to map those back.
What?
And were some of the ballots that you inspected duplicated ballots?
Yes, sir, they were.
And what are duplicated ballots?
Duplicated ballots are when there's an issue with the ballot and it cannot be ran through the tabulation system. Therefore, it is duplicated, and then that duplication is run through the system.
And is that duplication then the ballot that is actually tabulated and counted?
Yes, sir. The way the process works is the original ballot has to have the duplication ID attached to it, which Maricopa did. The part where they filled in the statute is according to the standards, that duplication ballot is supposed to be easily relatable to the original ballot. They said they could not find let me correct that. They could not find the duplicated ballot, which was tabulated.
Whoa.
So you inspected the original ballot that was duplicated?
Yes, sir.
And do I understand correctly that under your understanding of Arizona law is that the duplicate ballot and the original ballot are supposed to be maintained together physically?
Yes, sir. That's the EAC requirement. That's a standard when duplication is done.
And the duplicate ballot, which is the ballot that was counted,
Yes, sir.
was not available for you to inspect because of that.
No, sir, it was not.
What?
Why would there be? Could you tell me again why there might be a duplicated ballot situation?
It would be because it was physically damaged. I did see torn ballots. They could have coffee stains on them. They could have ink marks, or they could just be improperly configured.
How long did you take to conduct your inspection?
We were there all day, except for a 45-minute lunch break. It took the morning because of not being able to track the selected ballots that I wanted to look at. We worked together and found the samplings, and that took all morning to get that sorted out.
And did you take notes contemporaneously with your inspection?
Yes, sir.
Approximately how many ballots did you inspect?
There were 348 that were set aside, and then there were approximately 25 because we did not finish because of the time restraint.
And out of that 348 that were set aside, how many were ballots printed from a ballot on demand printer?
In what I analyzed between the 6 vote centers, I specifically, and then there was the spoiled ballots that could be examined. I requested that the spoiled ballots be from those same vote centers. This allows me a more accurate response to be able to look at a spoiled ballot and see it's just the same ballot ID and the same actual ballot style as another ballot within that same voting center. The one thing that I have to point out is out of all the spoiled ballots and the duplicated original ballots, there were a total of 113 ballots examined. 48 of those existed because there was a 19-inch image of a ballot printed on 20-inch paper.
Objection, Your Honor. Move to strike as non-responsive. Not sure what question he was answering.
What do you? I don't care what the question
I don't know
was.
that it was non-responsive.
Yeah.
I'll overrule it. You can cross-examine.
Thank you, Your Honor.
Woo.
So, Mr. Parikh, it's your testimony upon inspection of these ballots that you determined that there was a 19-inch ballot image projected onto the 20-inch paper. Is that accurate?
Yes, that is accurate. That's one of the initial things when I initially were reviewing evidence that was presented and in the public, I saw that the ballots, and it was, to me, was easily identifiable.
Okay. And is this something that going into this inspection you had seen evidence of?
Yes, sir.
And what evidence was that?
That was a photograph of a spoiled ballot right next to the reprinted ballot from a vote center. It's included in my declaration.
When you say that's included, do you mean the photographs?
Yes, sir.
And so when you were inspecting the ballots yesterday and you determined that the duplicated ballots and the spoiled ballots, I'll strike that. How many duplicated ballots did you inspect?
15 total.
And out of that, and duplicated again means that the ballot was rejected by the tabulator for some reason?
Yes, sir. It could not be tabulated at either the ICP2s, which are at the vote center, or the ICC at MTech.
How many of those contained a 19-inch ballot image on 20-inch paper?
14.
14.
Whoa. So
What about the other remaining one?
It was physically defective.
And when you say
It was
physically,
slightly torn.
slightly torn.
Wow.
Can you explain to the court how a 19-inch ballot image, we'll strike that. How did you determine that it was a 19-inch ballot image projected onto 20-inch paper?
Because these ballot images are a PDF file, which gets stored along with configuration settings. That's what makes up the ballot style and the ballot definition, which is created usually on the EMS, which the actual application that does the ballot.
Real quick, remember in Dr. Shiva's contest in New Hampshire, or wherever he was at, they didn't let him have the ballot images. They destroyed them. Woo!
Style is called EED, right? That's the application that actually does the ballot style. It's usually installed on the EMS servers. That application creates that style, the definition, because it needs those things because it gets loaded on the tabulator. That's how it's evaluated when the image is created. And that's the print job, to use a common term, that gets sent to the printer.
And how could And how did you determine that it was actually a 19-inch image projected onto a 20-inch paper?
I can determine that 100% of all the ballots are rejected because the mechanics of a printer, the feeds are not always accurate. On the 20-inch ballots, you can see the same, I refer to them as tick marks, but they're actually the borders of the image that is sent. And on the 20-inch ballots, you'll see about the very corner above the borders where there's any misfeed. On the 19-inch ballots, they were well viewable in the margins. There are 90-degree right angles at each corner of the page
And
the image.
did you physically measure the ballots to determine that?
Yes, sir, I did. I requested a ruler and Maricopa graciously got me one, and they got one of the other inspectors a ruler.
How could a 19-inch ballot image appear? Well, strike that. You've heard previous testimony. Were you here for Mr. Jarrett's testimony?
Yes, sir, I was.
And did you hear Mr. Jarrett testify that in the November 2022 general election, a 20-inch ballot was used?
Yes, sir, I did.
And did you hear Mr. Jarrett testify that it would be a failure of the system if a 19-inch ballot image was projected onto a 20-inch paper?
Objection, Your Honor, that misstates the testimony of the
What?
prior witness
No, it doesn't.
as to the word failure.
No, he agreed to it. We saw it
You're
live.
going to follow up with a question or an opinion.
No,
I
no,
think
no.
You can frame it as a hypothetical without arguing.
No, 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 no,
about
no, no.
the
Yes, Your Honor.
basis. Go ahead, rephrase.
In an election, which is purportedly designed to take place with a 20-inch ballot image on 20-inch paper, how could a 19-inch ballot image appear?
Objection called for speculation.
What?
Let's ask a question first, yes or no, if you can tell. Ask him if he can tell, and then the objection, and you can re-ask the question.
Yes, Your Honor. Mr. Parikh,
They get
given your experience and training, particularly with electronic
Ooh.
voting systems at 9 years, can you tell what the cause of a 19-inch ballot image being projected on 20-inch paper would be?
Yes, I can. I could give you both the technical ways that it could happen. There are only two ways that it can happen.
Uh-oh, let's talk about
Can
it.
you tell the court the two ways that can happen?
One way is by changing the printer adjustments. That would make the printer adjustments and settings override the image file that was set. The other is from the application side or the operating system side. This is the same for anybody who ever prints anything at home. Your Microsoft Word can send the settings, or it can say to use the default settings of the printers. And the application doing it, in this case, as it's a ballot, would have to be that there was a 19-inch image ballot definition.
And where does that definition reside?
That can vary depending on the system. But from what I heard in the testimony, it resides on the laptop that's connected to the printer, which I've seen it referred to as a control printer, but this is actually what would be called a print spooler, and it controls the print jobs to allow the printer to take on the load. And as there were multiple site books, this would be the technical use that laptop should be used for.
My goodness.
Is there any way, in your opinion, for a 19-inch ballot image to be projected on a 20-inch ballot by accident?
No, sir.
Why not?
Ooh.
Because the settings and the configurations and the procedures that are used cannot allow that. These are not a bump up against the printer and the settings change. There are security configurations. I've reviewed the evidence, and the printers are configured via script, which by any large organization that has to do multiple systems is a standard. This takes away the human error of somebody miscoding in the instructions either on the printer.
He's saying it's a script from down above downloaded. So if it went back to the 19, someone had to manually do it, is what he's saying.
prior to an election, would the strike them prior to an election, would it be detectable that a 19-inch ballot image had been projected onto 20-inch paper?
Yes, if logic and accuracy tested that all voting styles or ballot definitions were included, which a standard logic and accuracy testing should test every style that's available, and there should be a listing of said styles.
So what he's saying is it couldn't have been an accident. If they said they did the testing, you eliminate that. That's not the problem.
Is it, you performed testing for EAC certification, correct?
Yes, sir, I have.
Is it permissible to have two different ballot definitions in the same election with respect to the size of the ballot image?
No, sir. If, for example, if you live in an apartment building and your neighbor and you have the same school board district, you have the same precinct, all the jurisdictions for whether it's local, county, state, or federal are basically the same, that ballot style definition, the ID for it should be singular. If you do not, then you have two different styles. You're assessing them differently. That can also produce forgery. There's only supposed to be one ballot style per those voting options, and that's what controls it.
The 19-inch ballot image that you observed in your inspection on multiple ballots, including duplicated and spoiled ballots, correct?
Yes, sir.
What effect would a 19-inch ballot image projected on a 20-inch piece of paper used in the election in Maricopa for November 2022 have when it was placed into one of these vote center tabulators?
It would cause it to be rejected. According to Dominion's documentation, they performed somewhere from between 200 and 300 checks on the actual physical paper ballot that gets inserted into the system. They state, and this is according to Dominion, the vendor who created the application, that it can reject the ballot for any one of those. A 19-inch image being on 20-inch paper increases the margin. Once the timing marks are seen and they're evaluated, the actual physical printer that created the image is saying, by the application telling it, you're done, but there's a remaining inch of paper in there, so it would assume there's a paper jam. And to the tech, I specifically asked, there were paper jams to where he opened up and there was no paper. So from a programming perspective, the machine would throw the paper jam error, but yet there would be no paper.
And you're referring to a tech. You say you spoke to a tech. Would that be Aaron Smith?
Yes, sir.
Okay. And what did Mr. Smith tell you? First of all, who is Aaron? What is your understanding of Mr. Smith's role during the November 2022 election?
I think he repeatedly followed all the procedures that he was instructed to follow. He put a good solid effort forward to resolve the issues. It finally became to where the issue could not be resolved according to the procedures, and he actually had to request a replacement tabulator, which so happened to be misconfigured.
Do you know why Aaron wanted to testify today?
What's going on? Wait.
Withdraw the question, Your Honor.
Sounds going in and out.
What would it take? You mentioned that there are only two possibilities for how a 19-inch image could be configured onto the system to be put on a 20-inch piece of paper, correct?
Yes, my assessment applies to anything that is printed. Not just the specifics of this, but to anything that's printed. These are the way the technology functions.
Okay. But you testified that there's only two ways that this
there are only
situation
two.
could arise.
There are only two.
Okay. What would it take for you to determine which of the two possibilities is what occurred.
Specifically, as I did yesterday, inspecting the ballots. There were some ballots that were spotty, but the spottiness was also on batches from the vote centers that were correctly tabulated. So that confused me. And the stuff that was mentioned about the fusers and the heating, because they first said it was a toner issue when it's not, it's a tray weight issue, which affects the heat of the fusers. The mechanical function of a fuser and heater, from what I observed from the spottiness, did not match what is a standard error or example that would be demonstrated. There were one or two occasions that were exactly that way, but that was about 2 ballots out of all that I examined.
Wow.
But if you were to try to determine whether it was a printer issue, configuration issue, or an issue with the ballot definition with respect to how a 19-inch image was projected onto 20-inch paper, what would you need to do?
I would need to see the ballot styles and the ballot definitions. In totality, if there's 15,000 of them, all of them should be examined.
You're not getting that though. So
Do you have, obviously you've been practicing in the cyber field for 2 decades, correct?
Yes, sir. It includes everything.
So he's got to narrow this down to the only logical explanation is tampering or some type of thing outside of error. Remember, if Hobbs' defense is we didn't know it was an accident, that's not good enough based on my interpretation. So that's where we're getting.
Include printers.
That's what I was going to ask you. Do you work with printers? Do you understand how printers function and work? And at what level is your experience?
To a detailed level, to where I actually called one of the government agencies in the missile defense side to get highly upset because I understand the protocols that run. And it's not just printers, there are multifunctional devices, MFDs as we refer to them, because they can scan, they can print, they can send file transfers. And I've evaluated protocols. I've also done root cause analysis because classified printers they could print classified data even when they're not supposed to because of the rollers. And this is one thing I refer to it as ghost printing. I did see that repeatedly on the early vote ballots that were printed by Runtech because in my opinion, the ink was a little bit too deep and too shiny for that. And I was able to even see candidates' names in white space. It's very light and gray, but that's why I refer to it as ghost printing.
What would you recommend be done with the ballots currently stored at MTech now, given your findings from the inspection?
Objection.
I was
relevance.
about to, they're not going to do anything.
Speculation.
Yeah. I was waiting for that. It's not relevant.
You need to rephrase the question. I'm going to sustain it.
I want to know the answer, but it's not it's beyond the scope of this.
Do you have any concerns regarding the security of the ballots, given your findings
beyond the scope
from your inspection yesterday that a 19-inch image was projected onto the samples from 6 different vote centers that you examined of 20-inch paper?
Yes, I can. And if it is okay with the court, I have to answer this in 2 ways. They both are pertinent. But first, I observed how ballots were being pulled out and sampled, and they obliged in every direction, whether top, middle, or that they were provided. I observed more improperly imaged ballots that were not inspected that were there.
Whoa.
Now, to answer the question, those should be secured. I will state in my capacity, I handle everything from physical security to accrediting buildings for classified information storage. I've been a classified courier, which means I'm authorized to transport classified information. As a forensic investigator, I fully understand chain of custody. And what I
Oh.
will cite is
That's the other
that
count.
the facility and the security and chain of custody at the vault and the tabulation center are highly inaccurate,
Whoa.
and those ballots could be tampered with.
Whoa.
They should be sealed and appropriate actions. For example, security seals were only placed on the boxes that we inspected, and that was due to the court order, and they wanted to ensure that the proper security was done.
Objection, Your Honor. I'm going to move to strike as non-responsive.
No.
I'm not sure,
That's
again,
count.
what question that was answering.
That
No.
was non-responsive to the question.
What?
Beyond the scope.
How-
So of what's before the court.
The other count is chain of custody.
So
Thank you, Your Honor.
strike the last part of his answer, dealing
What?
with the security measures.
What? Well, that has to come up tomorrow then.
Your Honor, just a point of clarification. You said strike the last part. And
His answer, he had two parts to his answer. He said first, he observed ballots improperly, imaged ballots beyond what was sampled. That was part one. Part two is
Oh.
the commentary about the continued or ongoing storage. And
I hear that.
it's all right. I've been accused of being soft-spoken. Part two was the testimony that related to the ongoing security concerns. That's the part that is not relevant to the issues that are before the court today.
Wait, how are the
Yes, Your Honor. Mr. Parikh, you mentioned that you saw other ballots that you could see, do I understand that correctly, had a 19-inch ballot image projected onto 20-inch paper?
Yes, sir.
And how could you tell that?
Because the difference in the margin, as they were being taken out of the box and placed on the table and shuffled around, it was obvious, it was apparent to me.
Is there, when, on these ballots with a 19-inch image, are there marks that are different around the corners than the 20-inch ballots?
So you will see the corner edges of the image, which would be considered, the actual size of the paper. Those right angle marks at each, the top left, top right, bottom left, bottom right, are within the margin space. They're clearly visible.
Did you, you mentioned you kept notes
Yes, sir.
of your inspection. Did you draft a report that summarized those notes with conclusions?
Yes, sir, I did.
If the court were to ask you for it, would you be able to provide it to the court?
Yes, sir, I would.
And would that report be, would you swear to the accuracy of your conclusions in that report?
Yes, I would.
And would you swear to the accuracy of the results of your inspection in that report?
Yes, sir, I would.
Having a 19-inch ballot image projected on a 20-inch ballot, as you observed appearing from ballots cast in 6 different vote centers,
Yes.
duplicated ballots, spoiled ballots, that could only arise from, could it be by accident or is it?
No, sir, it could not be by accident.
Uh-oh.
Those are configuration changes that are administrative level on the printer, or they're with a ballot and style or ballot
There we go.
definition file. And those are done on the EMS system, which has password security and everything else. You have
Wow.
to the EED application is actually the one
Wow.
that creates the ballot style. That's what's used. It's commonly put on the EMS server because that's like the centerpiece.
If Hobbs' defense doesn't come up and say, somebody did this with a miscommunication or something, then all roads lead to somebody did something. Because what he said was it default at 20, given down just like from the Borg hive mind. The Queen says 20, it's all 20 for everybody. You don't change it at every precinct. So he's saying if it changed at the precinct, somebody went in with the password and everything. Woo!
And Those two systems are controlled access.
You testified earlier that you have been involved in other assessments of failures relating to cyber-related issues, correct?
Yes, sir.
And that we call that a root cause analysis, correct?
Yes, sir. I was part of the working group that established what's called the IRA process, which is a risk analysis and assessment process for the Missile Defense Agency years ago. It's a standard risk analysis and assessment. And in order to do that, that's the basis of how you analyze threat. And then you also, that's why you conduct root cause analysis, because you have to be specific when you assess risk, excuse me.
In the performance, in your experience, and you testified earlier that the federal government that had actually criminally prosecuted people based on your findings in a root cause analysis?
Yes, sir. And sometimes they ignored my analysis, but that's beyond.
He didn't want him to say that.
Given your opinion that, strike that, given your opinion and your knowledge of how ballot definitions are configured and how printers work, does your finding of a 19-inch image, ballot image placed on 20-inch paper, does that implicate violations of criminal law?
Wait, hold on before you answer
Yeah,
that.
whoa.
Objection, Your Honor. Calls for speculation, lack of foundation, and it calls for a legal conclusion.
Does call for a legal conclusion.
Your Honor, the witness has testified that.
I heard.
Yes, Your Honor. I'll sit down.
Shoot, I gotta play. Okay. I lost track what he was doing there.
Based on what you have determined on your physical examination of these ballots, your experience both in the industry as a certified forensic hacking investigator, your CISSP, your skills with, I believe you called it IRAP.
Yeah, we got it.
It's IRA. That's the acronym.
He's stalling to get the question out.
Specifically
for technical risk and assessment.
The lawyer is
one of the
stalling.
issues when I work for the voting system test labs to get all the vendors. I've dealt with over 7 of them to my memory. Right? None
His
of
head
them
is working.
performed
How do
at
I
the
ask the
labs
question?
that
How do I ask the
eventually
question?
convinced one lab to do this.
Smart.
Because this is vital to when you're doing system testing, let alone security system testing. And this applies not just to electronic voting systems. This is to all information systems, all technology. These are standard engineering principles.
Is there any way you could be wrong about a 19-inch image being placed on 20-inch paper?
No, sir. I give the technical options that are there. There are 2 ways that this can happen.
But we already
And based on
objection
this
already.
system
We already
and
talked
the
about that.
controls in place, this could not have been an accident. And there are only
Okay.
2 options.
Yep.
It would take further investigation,
Mhm.
further forensic examination for me to determine.
All he can say is a human did it. That's all he can say. He can't say whether someone did it on purpose or not. And that's very important because if they can't say someone did it on purpose, then it's all for naught.
exactly which one it was.
Thank you, Mr. Parikh.
That was intense.
Cross-exam? That be you, Mr. Liddy?
Yeah, I'm interested. Like, what are we going to do here? All they can say was an accident. What else can they say? They're not going to discredit this dude.
If we could do the counties first, I think we might get to the other one after lunch.
Oh, wait, what did you say? Okay.
Thank you, Your Honor. I appreciate that. As some of these allegations go directly to the conduct of the election by my client, Maricopa County. Is it Mr. Parikh? Is that correct pronunciation?
Yes, sir, it is.
And where do you reside, Mr. Parikh?
I reside in Huntsville, Alabama.
And you traveled up to Maricopa County for this proceeding?
Yes, sir, I did.
And who paid for your travel?
The attorney fund.
The attorney fund? What's the attorney fund?
No, don't try.
It's the legal fund. I believe it's for all the attorneys associated with this.
With this particular litigation?
Yes,
And did the attorney fund pay for lodging as well? Pay for your lodging?
yeah. Lodging is always considered travel.
And are you being paid for your time?
Yes,
And what is the rate at which you're being paid for your time?
Nah,
$250 an hour.
it better
That's
get
also
better than
coming
this.
from the attorney fund?
Yes,
They
Are
always
you
do
familiar
this.
with an event called Michael Lindell's Moment of Truth?
yes. I spoke at the event.
You appeared and spoke at the event?
Yes, I did.
And where was that event held?
In Missouri.
Missouri. And was your travel from Alabama to Missouri paid for by someone other than yourself?
Yes, sir.
And who paid for that?
That I would assume would be Michael Lindell. All their travel was arranged. He asked me to speak at the event and I spoke.
And that'd be true for your time? Did you also get paid for your time there?
I did not charge for my time.
You're trying to smear him as some type of MAGA idiot.
And your lodging?
That's considered travel that was provided to me.
And when you say Mr. Lindell, you're referring to the My Pillow guy?
Yes, sir.
Oh, okay. See how disrespectful the My Pillow guy. These are some evil people here.
And you are a cybersecurity professional?
Yes, sir, I am.
During your investigation of this election, did you detect any hacking involved in the 22 general election in Maricopa County?
No, sir.
That's not even up for question right now. What's the point of that? Ooh, this better get better quickly.
I believe you testified that yesterday you were down at McTech performing the court-ordered inspection of the ballots. Is that correct?
Yes, sir, I was.
And you were asked to select batches of ballots?
Yes,
You were asked to identify them. Did you use a highlighter and highlight the boxes?
yes, I did.
Did you observe the custodian of those ballots opening those boxes?
Yes. They opened them in front of all the inspectors. There was a court reporter inspected. There was the other inspector for the other side, the gentleman sitting over there.
I thought this was irrelevant.
Was
Why
an
are they-
attorney. We all were there as they went through.
Did the individual who opened the box break the seal?
By seal, are you referring to the red tape, which is simply red tape and not a security seal?
Well, I'm asking you so in your professional opinion, the ballots were not sealed.
The ballots did not have an appropriate security seal
Wait, they just objected saying this was irrelevant.
on the boxes.
That's not, in your professional opinion, the ballots were not sealed.
The ballots did not have an appropriate security seal on the boxes.
That's not on, so, okay, fine. My question was, were the ballots sealed?
They were closed with tape.
And where were they stored?
In the vault and in the tabulation center.
This is not a good start, but maybe he's setting it up.
And would you say that your profession details are important?
Yes, they're highly important.
And you said that you reviewed the statutes prior to initiating this investigation?
I always have to do that because it's relevant, especially if a state states a statute.
So that's a yes.
Yes.
And you also reviewed federal statutes.
Yes.
AVA, I think you said?
Hava.
I'll go as far as back as the 1990 FEC standards. I've reviewed them all, every version of the BVSG.
And you downloaded Title 16?
Yes. I like to have references for when they're referred to because they've been referred to in the Secretary of State's manual. They were referred to in the Maricopa manuals and procedures. So I like to actually read what's referred to ensure that it's accurate.
And when you read those documents, you pay close attention to detail because that's required by your profession. Is that correct?
I'm not a legal attorney. And so I read the laws for what they state. And
Because that's required by your profession. Is that correct?
I'm not a legal attorney. And so I read the laws for what they state and how they are.
And you testified that you reviewed some documents that were provided to late campaign by a FOIA request. Is that accurate?
Objection, Your Honor. I don't believe he ever testified to that.
Well, it's cross-exam, so he can answer the question if he understands it. If you don't understand the questions, Mr. Perry, you can have.
No, these were public record requests that came from me from other technical professionals.
So they were not FOIA requests.
They were, those records were obtained via FOIA request.
Are you familiar with FOIA? Can you tell me what FOIA stands for?
It's a Freedom of Information Act,
And is that a statute, a federal statute?
my knowledge.
So a FOIA can be either a state or a federal, in your understanding.
Yes.
And if federal was
What is going on?
FOIA and state was a public records request under the Arizona statute, that would be a detail that doesn't interest you?
That if the data was illegally obtained,
That's not the question. The question is the detail, difference between a federal statute and a state statute of interest to you.
when I'm provided evidence, I always ask the source of it.
Where
And I have received, in my experience, I have received evidence from law enforcement officials where that, in my opinion, were not properly obtained. And as a forensic investigator who understands chain of custody and all the legal ramifications, because for the court's record, the majority of that deals with the statutes. For example, the lockpicks that I own as part of my security thing, in my state, I have to have a private investigator license. These are the statutes that a forensic investigator handling evidence has to be aware of.
Thank you. And when you're working with your security thing, as you said it, are you familiar with federal statutes and state statutes?
Objection, Your Honor. Not sure that the question is.
Well, if he's
What kind of
confused,
federal-
I'll withdraw the question, Your Honor.
thank you. Next question.
You've just testified that you
They had to run and count them so they could try to map them back to which site they belong to.
of what Mr. Jarrett said when you asked to see the originals of the duplicates?
No, sir.
I'm
They
asking you
were-
detail. That's a detail that's important. You're telling this court that when you asked Mr. Jarrett to view the duplicates of the originals, that he told you it would take 6 hours.
To clarify, I did not ask to see duplicates. They were part of the vote center and they provided the entirety of what they have for the vote center. They could not provide what was originally.
Thank you, Mr. Curran. I think I asked you this to make sure that I understand it correctly, is that you did not ask to see the duplicates.
Objection misstates his prior testimony, argumentative.
This is cross, just for reference, and all cross. If he doesn't understand the question, he can have it rephrased, but particularly with an expert witness, I think he's capable of answering. If you don't understand, you can have him rephrase it. If you do understand, you can go ahead and answer. Would you like the question restated to you?
Yes, sir.
Please, Mr. Liddy.
Mr. Perrick, is it your recollection that when you asked Mr. Jarrett to see the duplicates and the originals, that he told you it would take 6 hours to get them?
One, I did not ask to see them. They were
That answers my
provided.
question then. Thank you, Mr. Perrick. That answers my question. You did not ask to see them.
Defense is struggling. This is not good for the defense.
Your Honor, if I may,
But there's just, your counsel have redirect,
yes, sir.
so just answer his questions for you.
Yes, sir. I just want to state that we were following.
But wait.
I have another question, if you,
Question for you.
Your Honor, it's appropriate.
Please.
What the hell? That's the defense?
You've testified that you have a working theory that some of the ballots for the 2022 general election were on 20-inch paper, but were printed at 19 inches. Is that correct?
19-inch image printed on 20-inch paper. It is not a theory.
Okay, so it was 20-inch paper. The ballot was 20 inches, correct?
The paper was 20 inches.
And the image was 19 inches, according to your testimony, correct?
The ballot image was 19 inches, yes.
Are you familiar with a shrink to fit setting on a printer?
Yes, yes, I am.
Would a shrink to fit setting
We're talking.
account for some of the ballots you observed being 19 inches on 20-inch paper?
That is a possibility, but it would violate the configuration settings they had for the voting systems and the tabulators.
And you've testified that you're familiar with the election process?
Yes, sir.
And you testified that if one were to take a 20-inch ballot that's shrunk to 19 inches and put it into a vote center precinct tabulator, it would not get tabulated.
It would not get tabulated at any tabulator.
Any tabulator. So,
That includes ICP or the ICCs at Central.
okay, so if it went down to Central, according to your understanding, and it was tried to run through the tower tabulators, it would also not be tabulated. Is that correct?
That is correct.
And you've just testified that you observed some duplicated ballots. Is it your understanding that a ballot that cannot be tabulated by a precinct-based tabulator and cannot be tabulated by a tower configured tabulator at Central would then be duplicated?
It would have to be because it couldn't be tabulated, so
And-
it would require duplication.
And after duplication, what would happen to that ballot?
The duplicated ballot, which is supposed to be marked with a specific ID, and that ID must be recorded on the original, and I saw those stickers on the originals.
Question is, what would happen to that ballot?
Then the ballot would be rerun through the duplicated ballot would be run through the tabulator.
So it would be tabulated. Is that your testimony?
The duplicated ballot would be tabulated. Yes, it should be.
Okay, so if a voter walked into a vote center on election day, filled out a ballot, maybe had a shrink to fit setting on it, so it wouldn't be counted on the tabletop, would go into door number 3, goes on down to McTech, they put it into the tower tabulator, and it doesn't get counted, and then it gets duplicated, and then it gets counted, so that voter's ballot was voted and tabulated. Is that your understanding?
You started,
Is that your understanding?
Your Honor, I can't answer that question the way he asked the question because it's inaccurate.
Ooh, this is important. Let's do it.
So that means it's not your, I'm sorry.
I don't understand. You can say, I don't understand. and
You do
can
have to say
rephrase
yes
it
or
so
no.
you can understand. But if you don't like the way it's phrased, that's something that your counsel will have to clear up.
Yes, sir. Your Honor, if I may address the court,
Oh,
No, bro, you can't do that.
I'm provided for technical expertise and give those options. And if the technical scenario is inaccurate, I cannot answer the question.
Let me try again.
Mm.
Ms. Lake, right here in this room, bona fide candidate for governor of the Grand Canyon State. Hundreds of thousands of voters would love to have had her as the next governor. One of them chooses not to vote in the 26 days of early voting or mail-in
Well,
voting
that's
or
irrelevant.
emergency vote center voting.
The
but
hell is
chooses
that?
to show up on election day, gets a ballot from a ballot on demand printer, and somebody either intentionally or inadvertently has hit the shrink to fit setting,
Whoa.
and this 20-inch ballot paper comes out 19 inches. This voter fills it out. Carrie Lake, want her to be the next governor, throws it into the precinct tabulator. It comes out, goes into door number 3, goes down to McTech. The much more sensitive tabulators, according to you, it would not count it. It would then go to duplication. It would be duplicated.
Yeah.
Then it would be tabulated. Is that your understanding of the elections in Maricopa County?
Your technical description is not possible.
So the answer is no.
I apologize.
He needs to just say no.
I wasn't attempting to give a technical description. I was just saying what happens based on your testimony.
So you're saying in that scenario, that voter who wanted to vote for Carrie Lake would never have that vote tabulated. Is that your testimony?
No, he's not talking.
My testimony is that a shrink to fit setting would rely at the application level, which would reside on the EMS, which Mr. Garrett just testified sends the print job to the printer. Therefore, it can't be accidental, as all the employees that man the EMS are trained.
Well,
Whether it's accidental or inadvertent.
I gave the two options, sir.
Please allow.
no, so let me pause this for a second. It's intense. But what the Hobbs defense is, they're saying it could have been intentional, that it doesn't matter because it would be counted anyway. And for him, that sounds like it's beyond his scope. My scope is I'm just looking to see what happened here. I don't know. We'll see where he talks about the tabulation. I think he should answer the question no, because that's beyond my scope.
Ask the question. I'll allow you to answer.
Because he's hurting himself as far as credibility. Just answer the question the best you understand it.
Whether it's accidental or inadvertent, if the shrink to fit 19-inch ballot has to be duplicated, once it's duplicated, would it be tabulated?
You can say it should be.
To your understanding.
There are two technical
No, this isn't good.
ways that image would be there.
That's not the question. The Hobbs is saying that no matter, forget all that. Would it still, in theory, should it still be counted? He's hurting himself big time here. He needs to just answer the question.
None of the ways you exist,
Sir, Your
it's
Honor,
not even possible.
That's
It's
not
not
responsive.
possible, Your Honor.
Wait, what's not possible?
I understand what you're saying, Mr. Parikh. That's not responsive to his question.
He's hurting himself
If you are
here.
able to answer his question, you can do that.
This is not good for Carrie Lake, guys. This is not good. Answer the question. You've got the redirect if you need to clarify.
Sir, are you able to answer the question?
Bruh.
I'm unable to answer your question.
Okay. Let me ask you
I
a
don't
different
like
question.
that. Not good. Not good.
Are duplicated ballots tabulated? Maricopa County, general election 2022.
If they're duplicated correctly and they're configured correctly, yes, they should be.
Thank you. No further questions, Your Honor.
Okay. Well, then he answered well there. So he should have just said that the first time. He heard him. He did so
Okay.
well. He heard himself
We're
right
at the
there.
point where we need to break.
Dang, I'm
Going
gonna have to
take
be
a
out.
1
too.
hour, not 1.5
Damn.
hour recess. So we'll be back.
Damn, this shit is like Perry Mason back in the day, yo. Except it's for our damn country. The country's coming down to shrink to fit. Our country is coming down to shrink to fit settings on a Microsoft Bill Gates created antiquated system and a computer. That's the new hanging chad, everybody. It wasn't, it's not a big deal. It was just the shrink to fit. What is, I'm gonna have to be out, man. I gotta go do some stuff and it's coming down to shrink to fit. That's what it comes down to. Who changed who just like maybe at home you might still have an old school printer. Those things are so annoying. The toner runs out that you don't use it for months and then all of a sudden it doesn't work. It's disconnected from the network. And honey, who changed the swing? I printed on 20 inches. Who changed it to shrink to fit? That's literally what our country has come down to right now. And Katie Hobbs acknowledged they basically admitted that it was intentional. They didn't question him on somebody had to manually go in there and change it. They did not question that. Their take was, even if somebody did do that, it still should have been counted. So that makes me wonder, what type of games are you playing? What do you mean? So you don't care that somebody changed the shrink to fit? Katie Hobbs was in charge of the election. And their defense was, forget about who did it, because we know somebody, basically that's what they said. They didn't challenge it. Yeah, we know somebody went in there to put the password in and switched it to shrink to fit. Why would somebody do that, Katie? This is despicable stuff here. Why would somebody do that, Katie? Why would somebody do that? Anybody home? Does anybody want to find out why somebody would do that? Maybe we would want to care, because he said the settings are set at the queen level, and then it's all handed down to the precinct. So you don't change it individually because it's too important. That's why. So, but somebody has the ability at the local level to log in with their password. Remember, we talked about Arizona with the shared password in the past. We don't know if that's happening now. But they have the ability to log in with their password and change the setting on a local level. Why would you do that? Is what I want to know. That's different than the court setting. Why would that happen? And do you care that it happened? Katie Hobbs is Secretary of State. Something doesn't smell right. I'm not making any allegations for YouTube or whoever else is who actually wants to fortify. I know you want to fortify things because Katie Hobbs is more the type of person you'd want than Carrie Lake, who's going to change things. I fully understand that. I'm not saying that. I'm not saying anything definitive. I just have questions. Why would that happen? Why do you not care? Did you know about this before? Why is that not? I haven't heard it come up. If you were in charge of the election, Katie Hobbs, the feckless one, why wouldn't that come up before now on your own? Conflict of interest. So people went back and said, oh, well, Brian Kemp did it or other people did it. Do I look like somebody who would support Brian Kemp being the Secretary of State over his own election? If you think so, I want you to look again. Don't straw man this. Why did this happen? Who did what? Because you did not contest that was the way. And why are we just not now hearing about it right now? And there was other stuff. Berserker in the chat was talking about, well, it sounded like he said something had to happen with the tray level, the weight on the tray too. That was not a natural machine thing. It sounds like we got a lot of questions. I'm going to have to be out. So I don't know if I'll redo it or if I'll watch it on my own or we'll hear the news. I think I'll have to watch this on my own because I don't trust other people to pick up what I want to pick up, and maybe I'm wrong. But who's the Attorney General? Is it in Arizona? Is it Mark Brnovich or something like that? And Mark, do you care about this? This is even if this whole thing goes down in the South Way for Carrie Lake. If you live in Arizona, those are answers. Those are questions that have to be answered. Who logged in? Everybody's supposed to have, I don't know if it applies to that because there's debate on whether that's a voting system or not. But in theory, in any type of general security process, every single person who has access to log in has to have a different password. Just like where you work, nobody shares a password. Nobody shares a login and a password. Why? Because we need to know whose password was used to access the system. That should take about 5 minutes to find out who logged in, if this was secured the right way, who logged into the computers and who changed it to shrink to fit or 19 inches on a 20 inch. And then we need to get them down somewhere with a spotlight on their face and we need to figure out what happened. That's probably my biggest takeaway at this point. I feel like I'm watching Columbo. We need to get Columbo in here with his drunk ass asking questions, people disrespecting him. That was my dude, man. I love Columbo. We need to get Perry Mason, Matlock, Columbo, my dude from Law and Order, Sam, what was his name? I love that show. We need to get them. We need to get somebody in a room with like spotlight on them and figure out what happened. That's the wildest part of this. They basically acknowledge somebody changed the setting on the printer. The most powerful country in the world, the elections came down to shrink to fit, allegedly. Anybody who's ever done that, like when you hear shrink to fit, it it's like planted in your memory. Like it's that option to click if you want to click it. And when's the last time you done that? Who does paper anymore? A shrink to fit setting. Somebody allegedly logged in, and we don't know if that's a possibility, logged into the computer at a local level. And this happened, it sounded like at multiple precincts. I'll have to go back and listen. It sounded like he'd got samples from 6 different. They only got a few samples. Can you imagine what they did, what they might not have seen? Maybe everything was perfect. It was the most perfect thing ever. I have a feeling that you would see evidence of fortification. This is a small sample in one county. What would happen if we went to Milwaukee County, Wayne County? What happened if we go across the country and look at all these different counties? Wow. Man, I wish they didn't have to go to break, but I got to go. Man. I'm grateful that for Kerry Lake to have brought this out. I to my knowledge, I haven't heard anything like this under oath. This is just day one. We haven't even gotten to the chain of custody yet. There's value to this no matter what happens. That's the big takeaway too. I'll look at some comments and then I keep saying I gotta go, but man, I'm kind of like stunned. The lead elite friend of show says, so from my understanding, someone changed the ballots to make them invalid so they wouldn't be counted. So here's my understanding is, and that article that I pulled up actually was relevant. So here's my understanding. I pulled up an article earlier that said in previous years, the ballot, so the paper is different than the ballot. So my understanding is the paper is to fit a 20-inch printed ballot, the actual ink and print. In prior elections, they had 18-inch and 19-inch. This one was more because there was more on the ballot. So what they're saying is, from the county level or whoever else, they set all the settings on the printers at the local precincts, is my understanding. They set the settings. So if I work at a precinct, I'm not setting it, I have to change it to 20 inch, because that'd be crazy. Some people might have it 17, 18, 19, 20, and you'd have it, all over the place, crazy. So the server, whoever controls that, Katie Hobbs is in charge of all of this, whoever controls the server says, all of you don't touch it. It's 20-inch printed on 20-inch paper is what my understanding is. And what we are finding out here is he took samples, 14 of the 16 or whatever samples were 19-inch on 20-inch. So that means it wouldn't read right the first time. Now, Katie Hobbs' defense is, they didn't say but they never challenged that someone. So before I even get to that, for it to have printed on the wrong setting for the paper, the setting for the paper, like say if you print it on a 10-inch, it would be like a small little print on a big paper. So for it to change from the 20-inch that defaulted from the server, it's impossible for that to have happened without a human logging in and using a password and changing the settings. So basically, Katie Hobbs is not, this is all alleged, but Katie Hobbs' defense at this point has not contested that. Somebody had to locally log in. So that's my question is, why did that happen? And do you care that happened? Mark Brnovich, all y'all, that has to be looked into. And really, if Arizona's if they're not paying attention, then whatever. But then Katie Hobbs' defense is, forget all that. Yeah, that did happen. They're not contesting it. But what they're saying is what would happen is it would fail, and then you would rerun it at some better printer that will interpret the 19-inch the right way, and then the duplicate ballot would be tabulated. So that is a fair defense. They're saying like, okay, why are we even talking about this if the ballot should have been tabulated anyway? My question is, something doesn't smell right. Why would you change the 19 to 20? Okay, that's fine. You say that it would have been, I don't know that for sure or not. Okay, you say that it should be tabulated. Number one, prove me that it was tabulated correctly. Do a full, breakdown of it. But number two, why was it changed from 19 to 20? Why did that happen? Let's start there. I want to know why. Because do you know some funny business of duplicating and something else happens? I'm not alleging, I'm asking why. And then my other question is, why don't you care? That's where I'm at. Man, that was way more intense than I expected. I don't know what I expect. I actually expected it to be boring. As you can see, you might see I changed my thumbnail because I'm like, this is way more exciting than I thought. Wow. Ryan M says, right, we haven't heard any of this under oath because no court would even look at in the past. And most of them, I have to go back and figure out exactly which and what. Most of them from before were rejected on standing or latches. They tried the latches on this one. And for whatever reason, the judge was like, nah, we're not doing that. So what they were saying is you either brought the lawsuit too early or too late. They didn't argue. They didn't want to get into this. So they brought out this thing and said, well, we don't even need to get into it because you brought the lawsuit too late in the past process. So when the judge when they tried to go with the latches, they were trying to do what they got last time. And this time, for whatever reason, the judge was like, I ain't having that. And now we're in that place where Ryan M says, now we're under oath. This is the last bastion of hope, the judicial system. If this goes under, it's all under. You're under oath now. There's no more fun and games. Do you solemnly swear? All the fun and game, all the grift? Do you solemnly swear that's the end of the grift? This is under oath in a court of law. The last bastion of hope. Congress has anti-racism in an omnibus bill. They're done. The executive branch is doing orders from Trump and all that against anti-Sem and violating the First Amendment. They're done. The last hope is the judicial branch. That's it. You got to give Trump credit because he's the one that, through his recommendations or whatever, picked these justices. Wow. So, but I don't know. Why do you say that, Berserker? I'm not an expert here. Maybe I'm lost. He said there could be 100,000 badly print ballots that got thrown out. But my understanding is Katie Hobbs is at least alleging, but it's good that you can allege that in theory it should be counted because you don't have to prove that they were. It's outside of the scope. So you see where they're going. God, that Berserker, you're right. Here's what the games, I'm going to talk about a hypothetical island to make sure that YouTube doesn't get mad about this. In a hypothetical island, if in a different world you had a piece of paper that was set to fit a print of a ballot of 20 inches, but somebody went in with a password and changed it to shrink to fit or 19 inches, so that someone did that purposely. No one's arguing that on this imaginary island. And so whoever did that probably knows that means it would get rejected. I think what Berserker made me think about is, okay, so they know that in the other printer, in theory, it should read it right and count it. That was not a part of the inspection. So their defense of, well, in theory, should it have been tabulated is easy to say when you don't have to prove it. So I don't know if the lawyer could say that. I'm wondering, it's like, can I object? How can you say, I object? I'm not a lawyer, obviously, but in my head, I'm like, I object. Prove me that they were tabulated. You can't make that argument if you can't prove it. Because why would someone do the 19 on 20 then in this imaginary island? Why would somebody do that then? Do they know that maybe they all don't get, maybe they should be, but maybe they all don't? So the more that you reject the possibility in this imaginary island, the more you reject, the higher chance of fewer getting tabulated. How can you make the claim that it should have been that it would have been tabulated if you don't have to prove it? They're playing games. I've seen, for me, I'm not going to say, because maybe I should drop and go to Rumble before I get in trouble or get the hell out of here. I've seen enough to know that something doesn't smell right. And I'm not making any statement. I'm just saying I just don't smell something right, YouTube. Let me get out of here before. Go on RSBN. This is like a mini series. Let me know what you think. Appreciate you. I'm out.